This is Circa Ignem, episode number 033, and our very special guest is Mr. Bryan Tellalian. Bryan, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Eli.
Manny, good evening.
Good evening.
So, we're going a little weird off script tonight. We're not actually outside, throwing, I think, both Manny and myself off. Rick's a pansy and decided to bail last minute, so... Love you, Manny. Or Rick. So, Bryan, I'm going to kick it over to you. Give us a brief intro about who you are, what you do, all that.
All right. Well, I teach political science full-time at one of the local community colleges, and I serve also as department chair for social sciences. I am an Armenian Rite Catholic, and been married for about 18 months.
Beautiful.
And so that's, and born and raised in the Valley. So went away. I did my undergrad at UC Davis. Worked in Sacramento in California politics for a little bit. Came back to the Valley. Went to San Joaquin College of Law. Got my JD there, and then doors were opening in higher education, and I've been teaching ever since. So that's the short version.
That's awesome, man. Married 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. You're still in that wed phase.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. All right. So I picked, I'm gonna read two of the other ones that you shared. I try to pick with a guest the one that I've read,
Understood.
or one of the ones that I've read.
Right, no problem.
And what's funny is I have read the Summa, but not enough to necessarily carry that conversation. So this is from Mere Christianity. Mm-hmm. And I thought this was applicable to some of the other ones that you threw to us. If you take a thing like a stone or a tree, it is what it is, and there seems no sense in saying it ought to have been otherwise. Of course, you may say a stone is the wrong shape if you want to use it for a rockery, and that a tree is a bad tree because it does not give you as much shade as you expected. But all you mean is that the stone or tree does not happen to be convenient for some purpose of your own. You are not, except as a joke, blaming them for that. You really know that, given the weather and the soil, the tree could not have been any different. What we, from our point of view, call a bad tree is obeying the laws of its nature just as much as a good one, in quotes. Now, have you noticed what follows? It follows that what we usually call the laws of nature, the way weather works on a tree, for example, may not really be laws in the strict sense, but only in a manner of speaking. When you say that falling stones always obey the law of gravitation, is not this much the same as saying that the law only means what stones always do? You do not really think that when a stone is let go, it suddenly remembers that it is under orders to fall to the ground. You only mean that, in fact, it does fall. In other words, you cannot be sure that there is anything over and above the facts themselves, any law about what ought to happen, as distinct from what does happen. The laws of nature as applied to stones or trees may only mean what nature in fact does. I'll stop there. What say you?
Well, that reminds me of what St. Thomas says about, what a law is. And so in St. Thomas Aquinas' treatise on law, he says that he talks about law coming from the Latin lex, from the verb legare, which means to bind. So he talks about a law as an ordination of reason by one who has care of the community for the common good and is promulgated, in other words, published.
Yeah.
And so he then goes on to ask, what are the different types of law? There's an eternal law, there's a natural law, there's human laws, there's sort of divine law. So these positive laws that God gives us. And then he goes on to talk about the relationships between those different types of laws. And so, yeah, you picked a really good one. You picked a really good quote. And so, yeah, and it also reminds me of C.S. Lewis' book, The Abolition of Man.
So good.
Yeah, where he gives a defense of the natural law. And so, C.S. Lewis, the reason I chose C.S. Lewis, and I hope I might be getting a little ahead of where we are in the interview, but when I was still Armenian Apostolic, which is one of the Oriental Orthodox churches, and I was beginning my faith journey, when I was starting to take my faith more seriously, you know, the books of C.S. Lewis were some of the first books that I read. Because, you know, it's Mere Christianity. He's talking to sort of all Christians, but then you read, you know, Mere Christianity or Screwtape Letters or The Great Divorce, or you read Abolition of Man. He gives a reasoned explanation of some of the basic tenets of Christianity. And so that was honestly was very inspiring, you know, and I guess you could say reassuring to a certain degree, that, you know, we have a faith that is real, it's intelligible, and, you know, it's defensible. So I haven't read everything that C.S. Lewis wrote, but I mean, I've read, you know,
the ones you've named off.
Yeah, the ones I named off, and then I read Chronicles of Narnia. I read those as an adult. You know, so I remember growing up. I remember elementary school. One of my friends, he was like, "Oh, I'm reading, you know, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe." I'm like, "What's that?" And I think some other people were reading it. I'm like, so I didn't read it really until much later.
Which I think, like, in some sense, you probably enjoyed them more, if I could say that, right? Like, because I think knowing that you'd read a lot of his intellectual work, and then you go to his fiction work, it's like, you know, the man behind the story, right? So like you can start to really like, and then also the context outside of that, right? Dear friend of J.R.R. Tolkien's, right? Like, historically, like historically place him in this time period, and go, wow. It's interesting. I forget who I heard say this, but they said that C.S. Lewis has such a gift for not talking to us as the reader, or and even his students, because he taught as well. Talked about how he had such a his brain was so powerful, right? Very intellectual man, but the way that he communicated, you never felt like he was condescending. You never felt like you were on like a plane below him. It was we're in this together. Right? And particularly whether it was logic, philosophy, you know, theology. He just had this really good way of also making it very real. That's what I like about that reading too. Is he's kind of like bantering a little bit and joking of like, the stone's just the stone. Like, it doesn't have like thought, or, you know, like it's not doing anything, but we're projecting onto it what we want to get out of it, right? Like, I don't know if you caught that in that, but I thought it was interesting how often law, we have to really be careful, because we're looking at law and going, well, what can I get out of this, instead of looking at it from a like a principle perspective of what am I doing wrong, or maybe not even necessarily what am I doing wrong, but how does this serve the community or myself, not in a self-serving way, right?
Well, that's one of the key distinctions in political philosophy, is that, you know, up until about Machiavelli, you had some sort of virtue-based ethics. So, for example, for those that read Aristotle's Politics, he identifies 6 different types of regimes, and the criteria that he uses is 1, the number of people that govern, and 2, whether the regime rules for the common good or for their self-interest, right? So he contrasts kingship with tyranny, right? Aristocracy with oligarchy, and polity with democracy, which is pretty controversial statement for the contemporary period, but
strange how this stuff doesn't change.
And St. Thomas, when he's writing De Regno, it's a treatise on kingship, and he carries that categorization over to his explanation of the different types of regime, and he talks about the common good, right? So it is the end or the purpose of the ruler or whoever is governing the regime. And so we talk about how we look at maybe the contemporary political situation, or even you could just look at especially the last century, where we see in the news, we get a distinct impression that rulers are governing for their self-interest versus serving. And I have to say, in part, I think the discipline of political science has some responsibility to bear for it as well, because
interesting.
Because there's a political scientist, Harold Laswell, who wrote about a 90-page work he talks about power. The subtitle is Who Gets What and How. Okay. And so he says, we're not going to explore what ought to happen, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to look at how politicians actually are. Okay. And so we observe political behavior, but we don't make judgments about the behavior, especially if we're looking at how regimes behave. And so what has happened is, politics is viewed, I think by some, as a sport, or it's almost voyeuristic in a way. And we have students coming to us that, they want to go and practice law. They want to work in government. They want to run for office. I'm talking about the political science majors that we teach. And there's a responsibility there. Mm-hmm. There's a responsibility there that the students act not just with knowledge, but with wisdom as well. And so I think, some in the profession, I think, have lost that, you could argue, our education system, to a larger extent, you could make the same critique, and, certainly our politicians, many of them don't give us fine examples of statesmanship. Yeah. So
I think it's interesting that you use the word discipline, right? That word isn't commonly used these days, mm-hmm. particularly in terms of any sort of practice, mm-hmm. right? But specifically, I'd say it's awesome hearing someone that's in the field going, I can be realistic about kind of holding the mirror up and going, maybe we haven't contributed well to the discipline of like those that start out maybe are already starting out with this ideology of oh, it's a sport, or what's I can get something out of this, versus not being altruistic, because there has to be something in what we decide as a career, as a job, for ourselves, but at the same time, our founding fathers in our regime set here in the U.S., it's very clear that the whole intent from the very beginning was no, we're meant to go and serve for a period of time, the people, our constituency, and then remove ourselves, right? It wasn't meant to be a career job. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's right. There was I can't remember if it was a political scientist or historian who said that the founding fathers didn't talk a lot about virtue, but if you read the Federalist Papers, there's an assumption that the people are going to be able to sort out the best among them in terms of virtue, and also that there's mediating bodies like the Electoral College and like the Senate that are designed to
filter out.
To filter out the more sort out the popular emotion, and there's supposed to be a deliberative element to our policy making. Now people can make their own judgments about how much that's been borne out, but to say they didn't talk about virtue or weren't concerned about it, I don't think is entirely accurate. And if they weren't concerned about virtue, what would be the point of revolting in the first place?
Agreed. And I think there's also I think the key element there though too is virtue was assumed at that point
that's
in
right.
culture, right? The lechery, debauchery, all that's existed from the dawn of man, right? But by and large, you lived in a puritanical, it was primarily puritanical, which meant that virtue was just assumed, that the men around you were approaching, maybe not always with 100% of the best intentions, but they were looking out more for the greater good and legacy good than for their own self-interest.
And certainly you can point to many occasions the founding fathers not behaving virtuously. My argument is not that they're saints. But
I can name a few.
Right. At the same time, you have people like Alexis de Tocqueville, who is sort of a French aristocrat. He traveled around the United States. He initially came to observe the American prison system, which I don't know why you would want to cross the ocean to do that. I mean, there's plenty of better things to do. We had a system, and he ends up writing a 2-volume work called Democracy in America. In the 1830s. So
clearly there was enough content for him to observe.
And what he says there is that across the different classes of people that he encounters, he says that there's a large degree of variance in terms of how God is worshipped, but there is agreement about the Christian ethic, about Christian morality, about how we ought to treat one another, and that Christianity, that faith, is necessary for the maintenance of Republican institutions. He says it's found in all classes. So I think that's important to remember because, the founding fathers that we hear a lot about, like Jefferson and Adams and Benjamin Franklin and, maybe Thomas Paine and, some others, they flirted with something called deism, or, maybe they were agnostic, but most of the founding fathers, and by founding fathers, just for the benefit of the audience, we're talking about people who either signed the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution or made some other significant contribution to the founding. Most of them were Protestant, some type of Protestant denomination. So when we're getting a little far afield, I'm sorry, but so Jefferson was the primary author of the Declaration of Independence, but the Continental Congress was a little concerned with some of the deistic terms that he used, and so they, at least one place, they changed the reference to God to be a more traditional sort of Christian reference to God that was, it was more palatable to the entire body. So I think when you're arguing over those types of distinctions, I don't think you can say people were not concerned with virtue. So, and plus a lot of these guys were classically educated, they're read and write in Latin and Greek. They're schooled in the Western canon. Maybe not St. Thomas Aquinas, but you get in that if you want. But enough to understand, I think.
And I think, to your point, even if they're not, even if they're flirting with, deistic elements, deism in general, having that schooling, right, already frames them in a very classically Western thought, right? So it's really hard. It's extremely, not so much anymore, but it was really, one could argue it would be very difficult for them to separate that from their philosophical beliefs, and it's very apparent, even though it might sneak in there in the case of Jefferson's, writings. If he's called to the carpet, he might back off after a little bit of like, oh wait, hold on, because he understands, the general audience that I'm dealing with is very Protestant, So, anyways, that's awesome. I could go on for a while. You and Andrew Finn, I think, would love to talk about this. He's got some awesome thoughts from a political standpoint. Anything else?
No, I think that's all I got on that one so far.
So we're going to go into the not so lightning round questions, because they don't end up being as quick as we thought they would be when we originally started. What's your wake up routine like, Bryan?
So, full disclosure, this is something I'm actively struggling with at this time. Okay,
I love it. We're on the same page right now.
I've listened to some of your guests, and I know some of the guys that have come on the show, and I'm up at 5 o'clock, and I do this, and then I do that, and that's beautiful, and that's something I aspire to. So, I'm, maybe well, first, my schedule varies during the week. So some days I'm working from home. Some days I'm on campus.
Gotcha.
And so, I might be waking up 6:30 or 7. Mm-hmm. And I'm the kind of person, like, before I pray, I have to get ready. I have to, shower. Mm-hmm. I have to feel, I've rinsed off or whatever. Mm-hmm. And just, I want to feel comfortable, to do that. And then... and Exodus 90 recently has been very helpful. So
as it is,
it's been very helpful, and so making sure that I get that prayer time in, especially the 20 minutes of silent prayer. I'm doing the Easter 50 challenge right now.
It's a beautiful, it's a beautiful.
So, and I'm not saying I've been 100% on that one either, but you're looking at a work in progress, folks. It's your taxpayer dollars at work. Anyways, so I mean that's that. It's some days are better than others.
Sure.
But it's highlighted, okay, this is an area where discipline is going to be required. And, human beings are really stubborn. I got news for you. Some fools are stubborn nowadays.
Yeah.
I'm talking about myself.
Yeah.
And there's some, you guys, some things are going to take some time, but pray for me.
Well,
but but that's the wake up routine and if I'm in the car, I think is where because the commute's 35 minutes.
So we're totally in the same boat. Manny, go ahead.
Yeah. So you teach, correct?
Correct.
Oh, I think my mic's not picking up.
Oh, can you hear me okay?
No, we're good.
Okay.
So you teach, assuming part of your morning routine is going to work, how do you prepare for to teach mentally?
So that's a good question, and the answer is different now than when it was when I was first starting. So when I first got hired, I mean, I was 24/7 working on lesson plans, getting my lectures together, all the things. Because in addition to that, you're working on tenure evaluation, and that process in itself is a very laborious process of putting those documents together, being observed. Anyways, so I'm working all day, coming home, taking a break, then working in the evenings, working on the weekends, all that. Now it's different. So most of the time, because I've given these lectures a lot now, after 12 years teaching, 10 years teaching full-time, most of the time I don't really have to prepare per se. I know what I'm going to say going into it because I've given the same talk, for a while. Not to say that there aren't changes, but now I can just, it's mostly, make sure we have to take attendance and do a few other things. I come in, go through my emails, get my documents together for class, and off to the classroom. So it's on, because it's almost on autopilot at this point, but personally and professionally, I'm honestly looking to revamp my classes, do a major revamp. So making new lecture, and I might be sort of kind of going through the whole process again.
Just as a self,
it needs to, it's, the one thing that, and at least I struggle with, and I think other instructors struggle with too, is making sure that you're doing justice to the subject in terms of course rigor, but making it accessible as well. So, so that's something I'm trying to dial in more acutely, and that's something I'll be working on this summer. So
that's cool. I mean So full disclosure, I've been struggling with the same thing, and you can ask these guys. I'm normally really, especially on the physical activity, very disciplined, and I think it's a couple factors that I've kind of zeroed in on, in the physical realm. I think there is some spiritual battle going on there, but in the physical realm, what's interesting is so time change happened. Then we got into end of school madness. Then I got sick. Right? So it's been this trifecta of things that have happened basically every 3 to 4 weeks that now have compounded into, we're kind of coming down off of that. And it's kind of, you reach this damage control of okay, I can't wake up early because I got off schedule enough to where the habit, the discipline changed. So then you're doing the workouts later, right? I'm doing them where I can fit them in, but that doesn't happen every time like it would if I was waking up in the morning. What hasn't changed for the most part, there have been errors, is the prayer life. And I use that as like the framework of like, if I don't deviate from this, then it's a good day.
Yeah.
Right? Everything else needs to be seen in context of this. Whereas normally it would be like, no, if I don't do the physical activity, I'm a mess, right? Now it's like, Lord, this has to happen, right? Like this is the North Star, North Compass, point, and then okay, I just trust that like you're gonna help me get the physical stuff figured out, where it can't happen. But so don't feel like you're alone.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks for jumping in on that, Eli.
I'm just being super honest and transparent.
If it helps you, I struggle too.
Shout out to Nanny as well, you guys.
All right. Anything else on the weekend?
No, I think I was pretty thorough on that.
Okay. Awesome. How many times have you been pulled over or interacted with the police?
Okay. So
dang, your body language
not
is
like I've
saying
had. So there's
I got out of prison.
There's two levels to this. So one, there is a story I want to tell you.
Okay.
In the past, let's just say I've had my share of speeding tickets. Okay. So we'll just chalk that under one category. But the most recent and the most interesting and the most fun one to talk about is when I had started dating my now wife.
Awesome.
So she was living in Sacramento, and I was, I'm here in the Valley. Shout out to the 559. And so I say, well, let me go more than halfway to meet her.
Sure.
So this is our first. So we met on Catholic Match. Okay.
Nice. Okay.
So we were, send her smiley face, message back and forth for a week or two, then video chatting for a couple of weeks, and then okay, let's meet. So our first date was in Lodi.
Okay.
And so we met for lunch. We went to the park, Lodi Lake.
Yeah.
It's really a pond, but it's still beautiful area. It's a nice area.
Yeah.
I mean, don't knock it.
No.
And all right, you too, Manny. Anyways, no. And
I'm familiar with it.
So you are familiar with it.
My
okay.
good buddy Bryan grew up there.
Okay.
And he talks about it a lot. Like he's like, it's similar to 559, where like I grew up here for the most part. Up till 8, I was in San Diego. Moved up here, so I grew up here. And it's funny, like growing up, you kind of look at it and you're like, this is kind of right, like. But now looking and living here, it's like, no, I really I love this area. It's got its own like beauty to it.
Yeah.
Lodi's the same way for Ryan.
Yeah.
Right? Like he's just like, people pass through and they're kind of like, oh, it's Lodi.
Well,
but he's
nice
just
area,
like, dude, it's nice, man.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you have one of the wineries to sponsor the show is what I think you should do.
There you go.
And so
hook us up, Bryan.
Yeah, I'm gonna try. I got to join a wine club there first.
Okay, so
we're in Lodi. We're at the park, and then my wife, she brings dessert from one of the bakeries or whatever in Sacramento, and so it starts raining. So we're sitting in the car, we're eating dessert, we're talking, and really just enjoying each other's company and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then this guy comes by in this white truck. I think it was a park employee.
Okay.
I say this like it's after the fact. It registers. It was a park employee, and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna close." Okay. And then I was like, "Who are these?" I don't know if that's what they said. It was very vague, and it's raining,
and
I'm trying to talk to this woman right now. Okay,
and I'm having a really good time.
I'm having a really good time, and you're interfering with my social agenda right now. So, and we both, my wife and I, we both like to talk.
Sure.
And so I don't know. It's like 30, 45 minutes later.
Okay.
And it's time to go. It's just time for her to go back to Sacramento. Time for me to come back here. Well, the gate's closed.
Oh, no.
The gate's closed. We're locked in the parking lot at Lodi Lake. We have to call the cops to come, and so they can come and open the gate.
Yeah.
So that was my last interaction with the police. With my, the woman I wanted to be my girlfriend, but we're married. It all worked out. Yeah. So.
That's a story.
I really appreciate what those fine officers did.
Did they have to cut the chain?
No, they had a key. They had a key. Yeah,
that's awesome.
So it must be a regular occurrence.
They're calling the guy in the park truck, going, "Dude, can you just raise your voice a little bit louder so people can hear?"
Yeah, I mean, I just thought it was some guy. I just thought it was, I'm like, is this how you want park employees to behave? You want to conduct themselves professionally. I guess parks close at sundown. I'm
not gonna lie, really Bryan, when you said he was driving in a white truck, I was like, oh no, Brian's in the parking lot where they're trying to catch a serial killer or a stalker. And they're like, hey, get out.
Yeah. So that was my last. That was my last interaction with the police.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. That's a good story.
Thank you.
Yeah. I love that it's a positive one. It's not
That's what I was going to say. It's good that it had a happy ending.
Yeah, it did.
And you notice I put this in a little bit later after I think a handful of episodes. It doesn't need to be a pullover. It doesn't need to be a negative, interaction. It can just be an interaction.
Yeah.
So, all right. What's your greatest accomplishment achievement today?
So I have thought about that, and I think there's a two-part answer to that question.
Awesome.
The first is becoming Catholic, and the second is marrying my wife.
Beautiful.
So those have to be the two top accomplishments, because becoming Catholic has really been a beautiful journey, not without its struggles. Interestingly, going back to the C.S. Lewis quote, this is very prescient. I felt more Armenian becoming Catholic.
What? How so?
Okay.
This is cool.
So, because
I would have never that I would not park those things in the same.
Because I'm an Armenian Rite Catholic, and so for people who may not know, you have autonomous churches that are in communion with Rome. So for every corresponding Orthodox church, there's a smaller group of Catholics who, by all intents and purposes, their architecture, liturgy, spiritual disciplines, traditions, customs, everything's the same, except they're in union with Rome. Mm-hmm. So I started as Armenian Apostolic. I was starting to take my faith more seriously as a member of the Armenian Apostolic Church. And then I discovered Catholic radio. So I started the priest, Armenian Apostolic priest, he gave me a Bible. I read through most of that. Flirted with Protestant radio and TV a little bit. But I was like, no, that's not it wasn't for me.
I'm really trying to button my tongue.
I'm trying to be charitable right now as well.
Same here.
And so I'm like, okay,
I
well,
love my Protestant brothers and sisters.
yeah, I mean, no disrespect. We could hone in on some things later, maybe in an ecumenical discussion.
Yes. Charitable truth.
Right, exactly. So I found Catholic radio and Catholic Answers.
Nice.
I'm like, okay, that's pretty similar. There are a lot of similarities. Have like the church fathers in common, liturgical calendar, Mary.
Yeah.
Then there's still differences between Orthodox and Catholics about Mary. But anyways, and I was really struck by a couple of things, which was one, how the apologists, the guest, dealt charitably and reasonably with the callers in answering their questions. So they didn't get upset. They didn't say, get off the phone, you big dope. That's there's
the Rush Limbaugh
there's a I think that's a I think that
a Levin.
I think that's a Levin thing. Like so
it's a shtick. That's a shtick.
And I mean obviously he's very successful, but when you're talking about matters of faith as intensely personal, and you're dealing with sort of the rawness of the human person.
Totally.
It requires a gentler touch, I think. And so...
And that requires a lot of practice, to your point.
Yeah.
On the apologist side and on the guest side of of knowing there has to be some internal but being able to check that and go, wait a second, how am I wounded the same way this person is talking, and understanding that complexity there too.
Right. And so what got me was their reference to the church fathers, because all the Catholic and Orthodox churches have the church fathers in common. So that's important, right?
Yep.
It's what's authoritative.
Concrete
foundation.
Yeah.
Yep. So I was looking, okay, they're right. And so it was about a 4 or 5 year journey. We can maybe get into some of the details later, but it was about a 4 or 5 year journey, and I was brought into the Catholic Church as Armenian Rite Catholic, and just looking at this, November 16th, 2008.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. And so that has been, and being a member of the, and when I say I was learning more about my faith. I was learning more about how the Catholic Church thinks about the Orthodox churches and how the Catholic Church treat, can you be Armenian and Catholic, or can you be Greek and Catholic, at the same time? The answer is you can.
Yeah. Benedict the 16th was really instrumental in a lot of that, of really making it clear, on that. But that's discussion.
And so, so that was critical. So sort of coming into the fullness of truth is what I mean by feeling more Armenian, more aware of my own heritage, my own right.
That's so cool.
And then being connected with the Pope, with Rome, and that's can be lived out and respected. I didn't have to give up per se what I've known.
I was literally just going to jump in. I think that the misconception is that the beauty of the church. I need to figure out. We came up with a phrase on this one time for a shirt, but Catholicism is not very much. It is unequivocally the most both and church that you can possibly find. Versus most out there are dichotomous. It's this or that, right? And it's fascinating. Like it's beautiful that, because there had to be this consternation, and we can get into this to a deep. But like, am I gonna have to shed, right? Like this cultural identity, right? From what I know in terms of the Armenian rite, to then all of a sudden like become Catholic, and it's like, no, like why would the church want that to go away?
And it's not
because there's got to be beautiful parts of your.
Oh my goodness! I mean, I think, my personal view is that the Armenian rite, we're talking about the liturgy and not just the liturgy, but a main component of a rite is the liturgy. Is just, I think it's very beautiful. I mean, maybe I'm biased. That's what I grew up in,
Bryan.
but I know it is very beautiful. Yeah. It is very beautiful. I mean, that's where I think I feel most at home, sort of as a parishioner. Yeah. And I think I just assaulted the microphone here. But
you weren't the first, and you won't be the last.
Okay, very well. But that's where I feel the most at home. I don't. Well, we could get into it more later, but so there was a lot of questions that I had that were answered in the course of the 5-year kind of journey. Yeah,
Okay.
A lot of questions.
It's funny going to the marriage. What's your wife's name?
Alicia.
Like, it's funny. We've had a number of guests that are kind of like, I feel like this is kind of the cliche, kind of the like, give me. But that is like that. We shouldn't diminish the powerful and awesomeness of marriage, right? And how cool it is that you and Alicia are now 18 months married, and while that might not necessarily be an achievement, right? It's not like you achieved her in some capacity, right?
No.
And she could say the same thing about you. It's more of recognizing how good the Lord is, right?
Right, as sort of cooperating with God's promptings in a certain way, because we both remarked to each other, like, I think we were like made for each other. Yeah, like she's literally the best woman I know, and I married her.
Yeah.
I was like,
I just got chills.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
Yeah. And neither of us is perfect, but I think we're perfect together.
Yep.
And
stop it, Bryan. You're making the rest of us look bad.
No, I'm just. Well, okay. The other side of this is your boy has been a bachelor for a long time.
Yeah.
It is rough out there. Okay.
That's awesome.
I mean, I was like tired.
The struggle is real.
The struggle is real. I mean, I don't have to look up at look at the moth die next to the light.
I'm gonna try to save you a little bit. So back in the Catholic answer stage, was Tim Staples already doing that, or
what? I saw Tim Staples in person.
Nice.
He was at Holy Spirit, and he did there's the Catholic Answers tracks. They're all bound in a single volume, and then I don't know if I ordered it or I bought it at the talk, but then he signed it. So that was like pretty sweet. Yeah.
I've recently started getting back into Catholic radio.
Oh, yeah.
Because back then, when I was doing my reversion, Catholic radio was huge too. Catholic Answers and all of that. Patrick Madrid is still doing.
Oh yeah, Patrick Madrid is the bomb.
So every morning on my way to work,
he's such a good entry level guy.
Yeah.
Like, just to your point, very charitable, very but just clear, concise. Doesn't waffle. And then he does a really good job of here's a couple more resources that I'm going to give you that I want you to look into, right? So he's also putting it back in their court of, if you're serious about this, you need to put the effort into understanding this isn't something we can do on the radio, with the time that we have.
Yeah. So yeah, so it's been wonderful being married.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful being married.
That's awesome, man.
So it's 18 months, so yeah, I guess it's still kind of new or whatever, but yeah, it's pretty awesome.
That's cool.
So
no,
yeah.
Brian's no longer a bachelor.
No.
All right. What is your greatest struggle with being Catholic, Christian, or with life in general?
That is a great question. I had a snarky answer
Snarky
to that, but I'm not going
is accepted. Sarcasm is accepted.
That would start. I don't know how it would be received. So I will chamber that.
Now I want to hear it.
I want all 6 rounds.
You want me to empty the clip?
Yeah, let's go.
I was going to say, okay, all right. I don't know how people are going to feel about this. They're like, what's the roughest part about being Catholic? And I was going to say the music.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
anyway, I mean, what besides the music is the question, but and
you are literally preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
All pun intended.
So, anyways, that's not the hardest part.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not the hardest part.
That's the snarky, sarcastic response.
That's the sarcastic response. The hardest part, I think, is learning how to trust God.
Damn.
If we're going to give you a serious answer, that's the serious answer, is learning how to trust God.
Yeah.
Is the process.
That's real.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
Do you know the litany of trust?
I didn't know there was a litany of trust. Why am I getting to this podcast and now there's a litany of trust?
Oh,
It's changed my life.
For reals?
I learned it when I did Exodus, and it has rocked my life. I will send it to you, Brian.
Yeah.
It's one of those litanies where, like, I'm reading through it, and it's just completely destroying all these things that I think I need to be. So to your point, like, it's just taking these things and going, no, you're never enough. You need to trust that God's enough. Right,
Yeah.
like the American ideal of, like, I have what it takes. That's one of the other ones. No, you don't have what it takes. He gives you what it takes to do the things that he calls you to do. Right, like, so it reframes it. And every time I pray it, there's one line that all of a sudden is like, ugh, like rough. But anyways, not to digress a ton, but that was a beautiful answer. I resonate with that very much so.
Actually,
it is currently in your messages.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah.
It's Hyman.
Emmanuel.
Oh my goodness. So we've got a couple of characters here, folks. So
and this is a dry episode.
I know.
We haven't even introduced the whiskey yet.
That's all right. There's the after party after this. So it's very interesting. I mentioned Exodus 90 a couple of times. It has been pivotal. It's been a game changer, because I think 2 or 3 weeks into Exodus 90, probably week 3, is sort of where I had an aha moment with respect to trust. And I was just between sort of there's the daily reflections, that they have, and between that, and then I was reading Pope Benedict's book on Jesus of Nazareth, and towards the end of the book, he talks about the Gospel of St. John and the different sort of images that are in play in the Gospel of St. John, and one of them is Jesus as the Good Shepherd. And so he talks about how what Jesus is doing is leading us to himself, and he's not just the shepherd or the sheep gate, but he's the pasture.
Oh, shit.
Also.
Oh.
Right?
Wow.
He's the pasture. Once you get in, so, then you just put yourself, in God's presence. Yeah. There you're just on the hillside with the rest of the sheep.
Wow.
Just chewing on your grass.
Your holy grass.
Yeah.
The grass that's Jesus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that would be, I guess,
Transubstantial.
Yeah. So,
that just blew my mind, by the way.
Yeah.
That gave me a lot of peace, and that helped, because that's something, and just being confident that God is leading each of us individually to Himself, and that He knows us, He loves us, He's prompting us, and we have to open ourselves up to Him to be able to receive that. And so one thing, what Exodus 90 helped me to do, I think, was to slow down and to be open and to be receptive, because I was open and receptive, and that was the fruit of that. And so Pope Benedict, and this is in the second volume of the Jesus, and I'm just starting to go through it, and he says Christianity isn't just a set of, I'm paraphrasing, but like sort of a radical morality, right? It's not just about morality. It's what we're receiving is a gift. And what are we going to do with that gift?
Amen.
Right? And so that requires a docility that we are really not comfortable with, because we have a lot of bad habits. We have a lot of attachments that aren't good. There's a lot of interior resistance, and
A lot of distraction.
it's distractions. And God is trying to just put all that stuff down and just focus on me. And so, and I'm not saying I'm not saying this has been a linear progression over these last few months. And anyway, it's up and down. That's right. But for participating in Exodus 90, and it was my wife who encouraged me, honestly, because we were talking about, we're going through those, the process of, becoming more accustomed to one another as a couple, and there's those natural bumps in the road. I told my wife, I don't want to argue with anybody else but you. That's how much you're the best. This is, if I have to disagree with somebody, I want it to be with my wife. But I can't remember who asked me to participate in Exodus 90 now. I can't remember if it was, Matt or somebody else.
It wouldn't shock me if it was Matt.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
Yeah. And then, just talk about with Matt, okay, I'm going to do it. These are the disciplines. And it became clear, okay, you should do it. Yeah, go ahead and do it, because my sense is like, one of my faults is like, okay, I go and do something, but then you invest, right? So
all your effort and energy
putting too many weights on, and it's like, no, you should have maybe you should have started with 30-40 pounds less, but I was like, okay, let's see if I can do it. So it was been very fruitful. So that was one of the insights that I had along the way, and it just brings a lot of peace.
You just called out the most beautiful part of marriage is that God gives us this friend, this and friend is such a weird word because it's not even a friend. It's more intimate than that. That like she's like encouraging you, and I can. There's so many times where Jamie doesn't really insert her like opinion on stuff very often, but I've gotten way more attuned to when she does. Okay, Lord, you're using her to call me into this, whatever it is, right? And the more I'm resistant to that, then I'm rejecting the reason why you put her into my life, which then, again, like there's the consternation and frustration. But it's just beautiful when you have that receptivity, that docility, the tenderness to be able to go, I trust this person, right?
And it's beautiful, that your wife's in your corner, you're in her corner, and you can mutually encourage each other, and we know what each other's struggles are, and we can, build each other up, or be the shoulder to cry on, or just be there to support each other. It's just a beautiful thing.
It is. It's awesome, man. Anything else on that?
No, that's it.
All right.
Don't clap, just throw money.
What is that from?
I don't know. I stole it from somewhere.
You should have owned it, Brian. You're like, that's my line. You're like,
copyright 2025.
Hey, it'll be copyrighted on this episode. So are you a fan of The Office, Brian?
No, I'm not.
Okay. All right.
I thought they were a little too crass and nasty towards one another.
All right.
Sorry.
So, no.
It's not okay, I'm not sorry then. Shit. The Office stinks. What do you want me to say? I'm going to lean into it. You want me to lean into it? And now
we're done.
I can't stand it.
Why are you the way that you are, Brian? That's the question.
Well, my brother said I was left on the doorstep by gypsies.
Wow.
So
your brother's
that's what
older?
he's younger, but he knew I wasn't from here.
That's awesome.
That was the, once in a while I'm like, man, you're younger. I'm like, we're just little kids,
Just
and he's saying this. I'm like, because I know he had to hear that from somewhere. It's like, you were left on the doorstep by gypsies.
And it got in your head.
So that's a great line. That's fantastic. So proud of that.
It makes me think of a Hunchback of Notre Dame movie.
Yeah. 3 cheers for Quasimodo.
Oh, man. Dude. Leave it to Manny to quote.
So, I don't know. Why am I the way that I... Well, that's an interesting question, and... I don't know. I guess I can't. I think the gypsy answer is actually the best answer. No, but product of, I think, obviously, my parents and how I was raised. And some of the the interests that I have. I've always been interested in politics, as we talked about at the beginning of the program. Interest in theology. The interest in literature, and I have an interest in, art. I do some drawing and painting and stuff like that, and so I guess that's sort of just, I think those I'm just interested in a lot of things. So it's I don't know, and I can be a little persnickety about certain things too. I can be a little bit of a perfectionist sometimes. I don't know if maybe you could tell. I don't know, but So that's, I would say, that, and being dropped off at the door. That's what happens. Being dropped off. I don't even think they put me down gently. To be quite honest with you.
No basket, no nothing.
No, nothing. No. No. Yeah, that's right. That was, I must have got like airdropped or something. I don't know. It was just,
Very Amazon delivery.
Yeah, it was an Amazon delivery. Yeah.
It wasn't. What is it? In some lore, it's the goose, right? Yeah, it's the goose. This is like a crow or something something rough that just
Yeah, when they told me to get my COVID shot, they sent me to the vet. I thought that was disrespectful.
Did they actually send you to the vet?
No.
Okay. I was like, I wouldn't be shocked if they did.
I wanted to follow that up with an ivermectin joke, but we'll leave it there.
That's okay.
All right. Anything up to this point?
No, that's it.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we can't throw a log on the fire, but we're going to take a break anyways. Hey guys, Eli here from Circa Ignem. Hope you're enjoying this week's guest so far. Just want to take a quick second to invite you to join our online community on all your social media platforms. We'll be sharing wholesome, Christ-centered content, and you can always stay up to date on the latest news and episodes. Listen, like, comment, subscribe, and share with all your friends. Thank you. And we're back. Got our nice little beverages going again. Brian's got his whole bar over here.
Yeah, I got a whole setup right now. This is fantastic.
He's got his stimulants. He's got his downers.
Wow.
Natural, of course.
Right.
All natural.
It's all organic. There's no GMOs.
Smelling salts.
Yeah. All right. Where were you born, Brian?
Fresno, California.
Okay.
Yeah.
559, baby.
Shout out to the 559. What's up, guys? Yeah.
Okay. What's your earliest memory?
Oh, good grief. So, my earliest memory is, I almost want to say being in the stroller, going in the parking lot, going to Gottschalk's to visit my great aunt. She worked for Gottschalk's for like 60 years. I think 61 actually.
Okay.
So we would go there sometimes. There was a Hungry Bear Cookies store inside the Gottschalk's.
Yep.
And sometimes my aunt would, get us cookies, or my parents would get us cookies, and those are really good cookies.
They are.
But I think that's my earliest memory is stroller going to visit my aunt.
That's so cool.
I call her my aunt. She's really my great aunt.
Okay.
But that's the earliest memory. I think.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Which location in Fresno?
Fashion Fair.
Okay.
Is the Fashion Fair location. Yeah.
That was one of the few stores that I was kind of bummed out when they started to really shut it down. Because they still maintain a certain level of just class, I guess. They were nice. They had everything basically that you wanted in the store, and it was and that's kind of gone away. Yeah. Sadly. So. Yeah. Okay.
That's the earliest memory.
Man. It's funny how memories work.
Yeah.
I always try and figure out, and not that there's ever any breakthrough, but I'm always wondering, why do I remember that of all the things? Why does that stick out? What's your favorite memory or group of memories growing up, early childhood?
Oh man. So I think early childhood, I think there's a collection of memories around my dad. I remember in third grade, I was learning multiplication tables. Or more to the point, I wasn't learning my multiplication tables. And my dad saw that I was struggling, and he stepped in. Okay. And so he would, give me those time tests, And then he realized, I was getting a little bit nervous. He's like, okay, Brian, stop. We're going to take 3 deep breaths.
Nice.
And, and we're going to practice. So that's what I did. And then I got a lot better at it.
Yep.
So I think, I think that's one of the early childhood memories of, my dad stepping in to help. My dad was, helped my brother and I when we were in Little League, playing catch with my dad in the driveway, going out to the local elementary school to practice, and Dad hitting grounders and stuff like that. Helping me. I remember, so I started out not as a good baseball player. Okay, so I was playing right field. That's where you can do the least damage to the team. And
right there with
right there, so you do the least damage to the team.
Yep.
And
but you're playing.
Yeah, you're playing. I'm out on the field. And then I think I moved to left field.
Oh.
Right.
Moving on up.
Yeah. Sometimes would play center.
Okay.
And then I don't know why. I don't know if it was my dad's idea or my idea or what, but somehow there was an opening for second base.
Nice.
And so there were tryouts.
Okay.
And then so I remember my dad, we would practice. So I beat out 2 other guys for that position. So I moved from the outfield to second base, doing batting practice and all that stuff. And I wasn't a power hitter, mind you, okay?
Yeah.
But I would get on base.
Yeah.
If you've seen Moneyball, what do we like about him? He gets on base.
Percentage on base.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So that was... and I wouldn't have gotten that far unless my dad was out there. He was not just helping me practice, but getting me batting lessons and talking with the coaches and all that kind of stuff, doing all the things a good dad would do.
Involved.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah.
So that was remember Little League, and they'd sell the Big League Chew, you have it, in your cheeks or whatever, and you're spitting like the baseball players or whatever. But you realize that's chewing tobacco.
Yeah, they're actually chewing on something.
You don't realize that till later. Bums.
You got this big old wad of gum in your mouth that you're like, dude, I can't even
you're spitting out the sunflower seeds, in the dugout or whatever. So yeah, those are...
You're chewing them up. You can't even break them open. You're just chewing them up.
Yeah. So those are some beautiful memories of growing up.
What I love, it's awesome that you said I've noticed with my own kids that excuse me, that it's awesome in those situations, seemingly mundane or ordinary, when you can step back and get them to learn principles of hey, you're stressed out about what you're doing right now, and I want to teach you how to not stress anymore. Take some breaths. It's okay. You're fine, right? And then teaching them how to do that when they're taking the test, right? Like walking them through on hey, we're practicing right now so that when you actually need to do this when I'm not around, you have the tools and the skill set to manage your emotions, work through the problem, figure it out, and it's cool seeing them kind of figure, oh, Dad's not just fishing for me, he's teaching me how to fish, that kind of principle. It's cool.
And the reason that's important is you're teaching the child how to you're giving them a skill set, you're giving them conflict resolution skills, and not necessarily a conflict, but you're giving them skills on how to handle different situations.
It's an internal conflict.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that you're giving the child confidence, and they're going to need that confidence going out into the world and all that. So you're laying a foundation for their future success.
You gave this talk not too long ago, Eli, about I think it was titled Wounds of the Father.
Oh yeah.
And just listening to what we're talking about and how sometimes the wounds that we get from our fathers, which is one of the points you touched on the talk, is just basically that they gave us the wrong coping skills, the wrong tools.
Yeah. Or they weren't involved.
Or not involved. Yeah. Versus, take 3 deep breaths. It was, yelling or whatever.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
Suck it up. And it's like,
and then you're left as an adult trying to figure out how to heal these wounds.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. 20, 30 years later, you're like, oh, that wasn't right. Like that's not how you're supposed to handle it.
So it's beautiful that one of your favorite memories is
that
him giving you a positive tool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we know. Assumed you grew up in the 559.
Oh yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
Frez, yes.
So what's like 3 to 4 more like stories growing up in the area? So you mentioned like playing baseball. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Any other things around baseball or just in general with your parents, family?
I would say, I don't know, just a lot of good memories about like, I don't know, I was really, so my parents are both retired teachers, so education is a big thing.
Yep.
And so my mom, is more the English history person. Mm-hmm. My dad was the science and math guy.
Okay.
And so we had all our bases covered
I was
pretty
just
much.
Say, you're like the blend of the two.
Yeah.
So the house of learned.
Yeah. So I remember, what was it? I think working on, what is it? My project for History Day. Working on the science, I think my mom helping me more with that, with the History Day stuff, and then my dad with the science fair and stuff like that. And we were like, what were we doing? Something about like, acid rain on like pine trees or whatever. And we had these little pine trees. Whoa. And like all that stuff. I don't know. We took these photos. I don't know. It was super. It was fun. It was cool. Yeah. But just, I'd say also sort of I remember my mom. This was maybe fast forward a little bit. So took it was an AP history class in high school, and just remember sitting on the living room floor and my mom quizzing me about just different things.
Everything.
Yeah. So so my parents, they were definitely involved in my education and pushing me. Because one of the things that, and I think it's because what they see is, how uninvolved some parents are, perhaps too many parents are in their own children's education. And, today there's a lot of concern about, teachers or educators substituting their judgment for the parents' judgment. But, I think in my parents' generation, I think they felt like they were trying to work with the parents. Mm-hmm. Like they were like, yes, the child's here. They're a steward of that child. They're responsible for and they did care. Mm-hmm. They did care what happened to the kids, and they were seeing that, there's a lot of parents who are not as actively involved in the student's education. And it was my mom who told me, that the child's first teacher is the parents.
Interesting. How Catholic is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's Armenian Apostolic, but you have that ethos.
Yes.
And first, not just in terms of like chronologically, you're the child's first teacher, but you're the primary educator of your children.
Yeah.
So. So there was a big emphasis on education, growing up. Yeah. So that would be sort of the collection of memories that I have around that. A little bit different direction. I remember in our old house, so I told you earlier I'm interested in drawing and painting and all that stuff. So another early memory is I was really interested in dinosaurs and drawing dinosaurs.
Nice.
And so I remember drawing a bunch of dinosaurs and then taping the pictures in the living room, just taping them around, which I don't know how much they appreciated that I did that or not.
What kind of tape was it?
It was Scotch tape.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't like...
Manny's like, it depends on what kind of tape.
Yeah, it wasn't duct tape, because that would have been... Yeah. I think I probably would have been grounded or something.
You're ripping the paint off the wall.
Yeah, so I was always entering the art contest, like these poster contests or whatever in elementary school. I would win those.
That's awesome.
In high school, I was on the school newspaper, and I was doing commentary, like political commentary.
That's cool.
But also, I was like drawing political cartoons and doing other illustrations for the school newspaper.
So you're doing like two different elements of like journalism.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So yeah, it was like me and this other kid. There's actually three of us that were kind of like the art class artists or whatever.
Yeah.
And so we would be sitting in there just drawing or whatever.
That's awesome.
So that was really cool. So a lot of that was like, okay, you're kind of like going on your own steam when you're working in journalism or whatever in that environment.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. That was, I think, junior or senior year in high school.
And you just like naturally, or were you asked?
Naturally. No, I'm just kidding. Definitely naturally.
All natty.
So there was I guess you could say, an innate interest in art, in having some sort of aptitude for drawing things that in a way that they look like things that you see in reality.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then also heavily influenced by comic books. Collected comic books in high school.
What were your favorite comic books?
So
I know that's a hard question, but that's what I'm asking.
That is hard. So I think my favorite comic book was Batman and Detective Comics.
I love it.
I love Batman.
Those were my favorite. I love Batman.
I need to connect you with my boys because they're all about that. They're just like Batman.
And there are probably some comic books I should not have been looking at.
For sure. For sure.
Not that they were
No, but I get what you're saying.
Illicit or anything, but just the content was dark.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to communicate.
It was more advanced for your maturity level.
It was too dark, and it's. I don't even think, in retrospect, it's good really for anybody to look at some of those darker things. But it didn't recognize it really at the time. Now with benefit of hindsight, I'm like,
why? Yeah.
Why shouldn't have? The artwork was really good.
Yep. As those things are, right?
And then took a 20-year hiatus from my artwork, roughly.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because I was like, law school and then teaching and being full-time and all that. Yeah. And then the last 3 or 4 years, really 3 years, it felt like, man, there's something's missing.
Yep.
Something's awry.
Yeah.
Okay. And we're not talking about whiskey, but something was awry. Something was awry. And it's like, I think I'm missing my art. Like, I want to do something where, I don't know, it's when you're drawing or you're painting or whatever, then maybe you can identify with the photography, or you're engaging in some of those more creative pursuits. It's like everything else goes away.
Amen.
It's like the little bubble comes in. This is a sound effect for the people. That, and it's like, okay. Now, if you're trying to develop your skills in art, though, because I went back to it, I started taking private lessons.
Okay.
So I had a friend who she was a colleague when I was a part-timer at one of the community colleges here. She had her MFA. She's classically trained in like representational art and all that. Mm-hmm. And so the last 2.5 years I've been going out to her studio. She, every twice a month.
That's legit.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, now I'm full, this is something I can do.
Investing in yourself.
Yeah, I'm investing in it, and so.
And it's paid off. I've seen your art.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. So.
I have not.
All right. Well, I'll show you.
Why are you holding out?
I'll show you after this.
Just for me.
It's just for me.
So
that was weird.
Sorry.
So I just got back into that and entered something in the Fresno County Fair, a couple of pieces. So one got second place in beginning mixed media, and I had an offer to purchase on the other one.
Nice, Bryan.
So I was like, okay, that's a
good sign.
Confirmation that you're sort of headed in the right direction. It's just something that continues to motivate. So, and primary subject matter that I enjoy right now is birds. I do bird watching. It's another hobby.
Awesome.
So I like to draw sort of what I see or paint what I see. So I enjoy that, and maybe branch out to sort of religious figurative work at some point. Mm-hmm. But and the primary medium right now is watercolor. But I don't know. You can't, paint it all. You can't, you can't do it all. But at least there's develop some skills, and then hopefully God willing keep building out. Keep building out. Yeah, absolutely.
No, I've played guitar since 12.
That's right.
And was writing songs all through that time, but never took it really seriously, right? Like it was always like very like random inspiration type stuff.
More intuitive.
Correct.
Yeah.
I've been very much treating it like a job now over the last, call it, couple years. And it's interesting, like what you're talking about when you start to like actually, and I should back up from the job. It's cathartic in many ways. It's meditative in many ways.
Right.
Where like it gives you the ability to just like, okay, driving, we all drive here. We've confirmed that. Driving is like the best time because now with like dictation, devices, like I can like just
that's cool.
I can vocalize and keep like or leave it but move it down and then keep tinkering, like word tinkering.
Strike
and,
that.
Yeah, exactly. Like
it's stenographer.
Yeah, and it's to your point. Like I just came up with a verse today. I was down in Bakersfield. I had to start pretty early, and I'm like super happy with it. But now I need to finish it, right? Like, so that's the other part. Like as creatives, it's like you get like these cool moments, and then now like this thing's just nagging at me. Like, okay, you got to finish it, Eli. Like, it's like when you're like halfway through a watercolor, and you're like, okay, I need to make sure that I still have the same visual of what I saw. I imagine I'm not.
There's a painting in the office right now that I'm working on. I thought I was gonna be done with it, and then I was like, this only needs a couple of hours. And this is still kind of the neophyte aspect. Only a couple of hours. Nope.
Yeah, nope.
So that's gonna take.
That's the same thing. It's like, I can bang it out in a day, and it's like, no, like it's not gonna happen.
But it's okay. It's a labor of love, and it's like you said, it's cathartic. It's very fulfilling, and something I enjoy doing. My wife is supportive of my artwork, so which is also very helpful. And
I
see where it goes.
What I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What I've noticed too, though, is there's a much deeper prayer life tied to it. In my case, I don't want to project onto you. Of recognizing that, like,
don't project, Eli. No, I'm just kidding.
He's just a stone.
Thank you, man. Thanks for putting a ball on it.
I feel really attacked right now. You shut your mouth when I'm talking to you. This connection of like, there's. I don't want to jump to this completely, but I feel like there's like a certain level of hardwiredness in this that like the Lord is like. To your point about gifts earlier on in the conversation, I've given you this gift. Don't squander it. Like, just use it. just do it. Don't, like, there's no other thing other than just be with me and do this, right? Like, and that's it, right? Whether there's any sort of indication of like, oh, this could turn into something other than what it is, that's not the point. The point is just do it, right? And then don't be afraid to share it. Don't be afraid to present it. Don't be afraid to like pursue it and do the right things with it and do it with quality. But at the same time, just do it, right? Like as simple as it sounds, it's like, no. This is like, you were feeling this void of, and there's something missing, right? Like I earnestly believe that we all have a certain element of creativity in us,
right? Absolutely.
And when we don't not necessarily pursue it, but if we don't express that,
right,
there's a certain level of, I'd argue, a lot of the depression that we see in culture is related to people that aren't like tapping into that. You know what I'm saying? Aren't expressing themselves in that way that draws out and relieves that like pressure valve of like, oh, I got work, I got all these other things, but it's like that absolutely is a way of, letting some of that. Yeah.
So there's a couple of things that come to my mind when you're talking about this, and this is actually, it's been something on my mind. Usually professional artists, when you go to their websites, they'll have an artist statement, so it's their philosophy of why they do what they do. So I haven't looked into this too much, but there's J.R.R. Tolkien has this idea of subcreation, right? So in the mythology of Lord of the Rings, there's, in the Silmarillion, there's one of the, I don't know if you would call it an angel or a demigod, creates the dwarves.
Yeah, Alwe.
Yeah.
Alwe.
I think that could be it. Yeah.
Yeah, Alwe.
And it's sort of outside of Iluvatar's plan.
Yes. Yeah. He's kind of doing it not deviantly, but just
he's not trying to be a deviant. Yeah. He's not trying to be disobedient.
Yes.
Right.
But he's just creative.
He sees. I think that Iluvatar is supposed to be God.
Yeah.
Right? He sees God create, and so he wants to, in imitation of God, he wants to create also.
Yep.
And so there's this idea, I think, that we're made in the image and likeness of God, and God, we refer to God as the creator, right? And Tolkien talks about Iluvatar sort of singing the world into existence. And I just was listening to a podcast where Bishop Bryan was talking about something similar about God I think there's different traditions of God singing the world into existence.
I think it's in Psalms where it's like he sings over his children, right? So it's this element of that, his harmony just that harmony itself creates more life. It creates more, anyways.
Yeah, so it's like this you're like imitating, it's like a child imitating his father, right? Or a daughter imitating, her mother. Is there something to it where, we can't create a tree, but maybe we could paint a tree.
Yeah.
And just like a father delights in, the son mimicking, and, God, takes pleasure in our, like, this, look at what my child did.
Yeah, totally.
So I have to develop that more and look into it more, but
that's
I feel like that's
absolutely, and I think it's I've never thought about it in terms of that reflection, right? Of like, it's, as you're talking, I can think of so many times where I have two boys that are very tactilely, like, they love working on, like, with tools.
Right.
And they see me working out in the garage plenty, and they'll come out and they're like they're doing things not on the right stuff, but with the right tools. And it's because they've seen me so many times, like, working on stuff. And it's cool, like, seeing them, and you're like, that's cool. You know, like, you don't have any clue what you're doing, but it's the delight of seeing the desire to want to be like, as weird as it sounds, like me, but how much more are we also with God the Father trying to do this? Like, I can't actually create like you can, but I'm gonna mimic it, you know.
And you know, so something that, you know, there's one of the Psalms says, you know, let my prayer rise as incense smoke. And, you know, for, you know, I guess you could say creatives, whether it's, you know, music or art or photography, or even if it's, you know, something more tactile, like you were saying, you know, it's like, let our work rise as incense smoke. So our work, what we create, we can offer that, you know, back to God. So
we want to create something that's worthy of God's refrigerator door.
That's right.
Nice. That's cool.
I meant that to be funnier, but
no, it's the imagery works in terms of, like, more obviously way more perfectly than for us, but, like, he's got that thing just slapped all over with stuff, right? Then most of it's stick figures and most of it's, you know, like, but he still delights in it, right? Like, it's like, that's my loved one that's doing that, you know. So cool. Manny, anything photography wise that you wanted to connect with?
My experience with photography was, like you guys were saying, cathartic and transcending the reality around me into that bubble. And then I took it because, aside from creative, I'm very business minded. I like the whole entrepreneur mindset when I was younger and all of that. And so I took that and decided to make it into a living. And then it just killed all of that for me. It destroyed it for me, and it turned into a job that I didn't enjoy what I was doing. So at one point I ended up, partially the way the world was at the time, you know, smartphones were coming out with cameras and all these things. It kind of forced me out of it, and I'm grateful because now when I do it for me. And
it's fun again.
I don't make money off of it or anything like that, but when I do it, I get an idea, a creative idea, and I put the shoot together in my head and who I'm gonna need, what lights I'm gonna need, where I want to do, and all that, and then I'll create just one image, and then it's just for me.
That's cool.
I'll share it, but it's just for me.
That's cool.
So, and I way more enjoy that than when I was doing it for a living.
That's cool.
It was doing weddings and that kind of thing.
Right.
Sucks the life out.
Yeah, it can. It can.
All right. What's up?
I got a warning here. Do you want to use the audio device iPhone 5 microphone?
No.
Okay.
Is it still recording?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Hopefully we don't need to clip that out.
No, I'm just kidding.
An hour 30 is if you want to check it when.
Okay, cool.
If we have to clip it up.
Awesome. Are parents still together? I'm assuming.
Yes, Bryan? Absolutely. Yeah.
That's awesome. How long have they been married?
Over 45 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
Yeah, they've been married together. They've been married and living together a long time. So,
are they just so happy that you're now married?
You know, look, I mean, they were hoping I'd pull it together at some point. You know,
the struggle's real, Mom.
It wasn't for a lack of trying. I'll tell you that right now. I'll tell you that. I mean, that's the short version. It wasn't for a lack of trying. Good grief.
I've told Manny, a lot of guys, like, I could not do it right now. Like, I just could not, like, in terms of having to, like, be in the game, so to speak. Like, I would just be like, nah. Like,
you mentioned, I don't know if we're jumping around here, but you mentioned the Catholic dating app.
Yeah, Catholic match.
I guess I'm just curious, how's that?
Oh boy. So
Brian's like, how much time you got?
So I will tell you, I don't know exactly what people are thinking on these apps. And usually if you're single, you're out there, you're not just on one app, you're on, at least a couple of apps. And I mean, there's people, they don't respond to you, which is, fine. And then you have, groups of people that they don't know if they want to be in or out of the game or whatever.
Gotcha.
There's people that maybe they're not quite what they say they are. But as my dad said, it only takes one.
Yep.
So it only took one for me, and
Yep.
we're just. I'm glad I found my wife. We were both looking. We're, I think, both in the right mindset. Who knows. But it's we, like I mentioned earlier, it's like we frequently reflect. It's not. I mean, this is more than a coincidence of us being together.
Yep.
And so, but I mean, it is, for guys that are out there dating, and for women too, I imagine it's, it's very difficult. It's already difficult, just inherently.
Yeah.
And then, our modern culture has so much going on. There's so much topsy-turviness to it that, and there's just a lot of wounded folks out there. I mean, we all have our stuff.
Totally.
But it just... there's a lot of difficulties out there for people in terms of, finding their husband, finding their wife.
I think the hope is that I actually was just recommending like Catholic Match to someone. I forget. I'm not going to say it on the podcast, but
don't put them on blast.
I'm not.
Yeah.
But the cool thing, I will for sure.
I'm just kidding. I don't need to know. I'm just being difficult.
The cool thing is that like the hope and the beauty of technology working the way it did for you
absolutely,
and Alicia,
like
where it's like that's the point, right? The point is that like it removes all the clutter, it removes all the noise, and it's like this made us really enjoy like like getting to know each other again versus it being a
and we had a wonderful time dating. Just it's, I don't know, it's just, and it made, I don't know, I mean, because we're both over 40, but I mean, you feel younger.
Yep. Totally.
When you're, I don't know. I mean, it was like, oh man, like we,
when you're in love.
When you're in love, we're just stay up late
Twitter
talking.
page.
Totally Twitter. Look, and I love Bambi too. I love that movie. What is wrong with you people? That's classic Disney animation.
It is. Before they went all weird.
You got Thumper, you got Flower. What's up? Show some respect. Put some respect on their names. That's what I'm trying to tell you right now.
So we're gonna. That was Manny just like threw the curveball on the.
Right.
So Catholic Match.
Yes. Back to your childhood.
Siblings? Any siblings?
Yes, I have a younger brother.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Younger brother.
Yeah.
Cool. How many years difference?
2 years apart.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
How old are you again, Brian?
45.
You don't
I'm
have to
turn
answer
46.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're in our midlife part of our journey.
No, don't say that.
Okay, we're not. Okay. All right. Oh, I'm 25 then.
There you go. We'll light you a candle. We'll light you a candle after this.
Yeah. Can you help me out to the car when we're done?
Oh, I have a walker in house for specific guests like yourself.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. I wouldn't get this kind of treatment at the home. I mean, I don't know. My people suffered enough. Now I have to deal with this. Anyways.
It's just because Eli does jiu-jitsu at 5 a.m.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So let's transition into adolescence. What was adolescence like for you, Bryan?
Wow. Yeah, I think that was just a bizarre period of time, man. It's just weird. I know, it's just awkward. Like, I was not like the popular kid in school. Like, I had friends, but it was just so weird just trying to navigate and find your way. Remember, I know, 8th grade was pretty cool. Freshman year was weird. I don't really feel like I really enjoyed myself until senior year, to be quite honest with you. If I have to be totally honest about it. You know.
I don't think you're insular in that, though.
Right.
I can't speak from my own personal, but I think a lot of people struggled up to like junior, senior year, and then all of a sudden it was like, okay, I think I got this thing figured out. I've got my group of friends. Like,
yeah.
So what made it like? What was the struggle like? We're gonna kind of deviate from the questions that I had.
I just didn't. I was just awkward. I was, shy.
Yeah.
I'm still a little shy. Still have some of that shyness.
Well, it's not apparent at all.
Right. Well, but I mean, you have to fake it until you make it. But I was shy. I wasn't. I was. Definitely focused on school and getting good grades and all that kind of stuff. But it was just awkward, just figuring out how to like come into myself, know. So yeah.
And this was what, like early 90s? Mid-90s?
Yeah, early mid-90s. Yeah, mid-90s. Yeah, I graduated in 97.
What was all the hype at that time? I'm trying to remember.
I don't know. There was like
grunge.
A lot of, oh my gosh.
Yeah, grunge going on. That was like, in terms
so
of culture.
Depressing. Like, everybody, I still don't get Pearl Jam. I'm like, it just sounds so depressing.
So you had the grunge movement going.
We're not doing this.
Then you had...
what were you into?
I like U2, man.
Nice.
Yeah. I like the melodic stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Heck yeah.
So,
They are the only band that has the worst album ever in the history of music and the best album. Did you know that?
What's the best and the worst album?
I don't actually know the names of the albums, but
I know there's one album I hate.
Yeah.
The one that Apple makes you can't get rid of your Apple device.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I thought I was able to delete that.
I deleted it multiple times and it keeps coming back.
It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. When my phone automatically connects and it wants to automatically upload.
No, you cannot get rid of this. This is how we track you, is through YouTube.
Yeah.
So what shifted from freshman all the way through junior to senior year?
I think having a stable group of friends and I think being able to do stuff that I was good at, I think helped a lot. And then just being more social. I think, not that I was like standoffish, but like it was so interesting the senior year. So I was like, I'm doing the journalism stuff. That was a blast. Honestly, that was just so much fun. And then I don't know, I was getting along with like some of the popular kids too, or something. I don't know, it's just this weird thing of like I had like my friends. We were just I don't know if normal's the right word. We were just doing our own thing, and but then like just sort of like moving amongst the different social groups or whatever. And I don't know how that happened or why that happened or whatever, but
I think it's.
I don't know. That's just sort of.
Was it a smaller school that you went to?
I went to Bullard, so it was they had like 2,500 kids there.
That's a big school, especially for the 90s even.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me is like my own experience. I feel like that and I'm not saying this is not a absolute, but I feel like by late junior, senior year, that like the whole clique thing all of a sudden becomes a lot less important.
Yeah.
Like in my own experience, that's like really what started to break down was like, okay, just because you're skaters doesn't mean that like we can't like hang out and talk because I'm not a skater.
Right.
Like that used to exist like freshman, sophomore, junior year. It was like, no. You know, like you can't do that. Versus all of a sudden senior year, it's like, we're good. You know, like a little more of that, I should say.
And I think part of what happened there too was it's not just happening for one person. That's happening for a lot of people.
Correct.
You know, they're seeing that. So,
and it's also by virtue of being in the same class for that long.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, like the people that might not really have known you are all of a sudden like, dude, Bryan's a cool dude.
Yeah.
It just took a little bit longer to get to know him, and I want to hang out with him versus I just didn't know him before.
Right.
You know.
Right. Yeah. I think there was some of that. Yeah.
I feel like the progression in our culture in this country from we'll say the 70s till now to the 2000s, that whole, especially in the 90s, the whole anti-bullying thing, I think slowly has been working. I don't think it's been, a lot of results from it aren't great, but in a way I think I've seen that diminish, the whole clique thing and just seeing it, you know, from the 90s, 2000s, and then seeing my kids going through it now. There's things that we dealt with back then that it doesn't even exist for them now, and I'm just like, what? It's weird.
I have mixed feelings about that, like, because like when I was going to high school, like getting hazed was like a normal process, and I like looking back, there are fond memories like to that of like, maybe it kind of sucked when you're in it, but there's also, it's like a rite of passage. There's a certain level of like, okay, now that you're through it, it's like we've all been through, like once you're beyond it, it's like everyone else had to go through it too, right? So it's like it's not like everyone, there's certain people that didn't have to experience it. But again, there are people that take it to the extreme and don't understand, like, no, there's a difference between, like, I swear someone's going to blast me for this. There's a difference between hazing and bullying. Like, bullying, like, the bullying that I see, like, on like, social media and stuff, I'm like, that's insane.
Oh, that's a different world.
Right, yeah, like the hazing, like, when you dump someone in a freaking trash can, it's like, okay, like, whatever. That's funny, you know. Like, were you
both doing the dumping or being dumped? Because I was like, there's two different perspectives.
Both, yeah, both. But you're also not picking a trash can that's got stuff in it, right? Like, you're doing it more out of like a rite of passage. So,
but in this extreme PC world that we live in now, I feel like a lot of that's
not happening. So
I have a story about the bullying. So, because I was both the recipient of bullying, and I
did it too.
I you know, there was a couple of kids that me and my friends, you know, bullied going through middle school and high school. And so, middle school, there was this kid, and I don't know if we bullied him in high school, but I remember middle school bullying this kid. And fast forward to like, okay, it was after 2008. It was after becoming Catholic. I was part of a young adult group, and this guy starts coming, who I bullied. He started coming to the young adult group.
Interesting. Okay.
And I was like, okay. Then it just, when I saw him, of course, you know, I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay. So after the meeting, I just went up to him. I just apologized.
Nice.
You know, and we were doing our Bible study or whatever, and I'm like, you know what? And I'm not saying this like this makes me a good person, because I'm having to apologize, right? But like,
no, but that's a big step.
Yeah, but I'm like, here's my Bible. Yeah. You can have my Bible. I'm really sorry. Just as a token of, like, I'm, like, legitimately sorry. Yeah. And so we were able to reconcile.
That's cool.
And,
that's beautiful. Man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, well, and I'm like, he must be here, and I must have hurt him, is what I'm thinking. Because it's not an incident. It's not a coincidence.
Yeah.
right?
No, there aren't
It's
coincidences.
not a coincidence.
The God we believe in is not coincidental.
And it's like, no, okay,
you know?
yeah, you know what? Yeah, you got some of it, but you gave it to some of this other. So, okay,
Yeah.
you know, you got to make it right.
Yeah.
So,
That's awesome. How did it, like good
cool.
on his
Oh,
end,
yeah,
too?
definitely.
That's
Yeah, it was
cool.
good. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Healing. That's the
Resolved
beauty,
very well, yeah.
That's awesome. And he remembered.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't forget that stuff.
No.
You don't forget that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you do? No, you don't have to answer that. That was don't answer that. Let's move on.
It's like this wasn't part of the
I
questions,
just
guys.
was being vulnerable right now, and you want me to give you more? Good grief.
Manny's enjoying this. He's like, oh, we're gonna cook him.
No, we're not.
All
That's
right.
why we provide all the comfort and all the
Yeah,
treats.
I know. It's a lull me into a false sense of security.
But that's as much as it's difficult, right? Like that's to your point. Like there's a vulnerability there of admitting, yeah, I did not treat this person the way he should have been treated. The flip side of it is you actually took the step. Can I honestly look myself in the mirror and say that I would, in that moment, like, or maybe after a few meetings, all of a sudden be like convicted of, I need to say something, right? Because to your point, he remembered. He did not forget, and he knew exactly who you were. So it's a function of he's looking at you like, are you going to still be the same guy you were however many years ago, or has something changed?
Yeah.
Because we're in an environment where it's
Right.
like, that what you did should be like par for the course,
Right,
Instead of
right.
just like I'm just gonna ignore the.
No,
that
I don't
happens,
think I couldn't ignore
For
it.
sure.
Yeah.
Or even worse, he sees you there and then doesn't come back.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
face him
Yeah,
the
it's
first
like,
time.
no, okay, you know. I mean, it's definitely not about me, and
For
he's
sure.
here. He's
Yeah.
looking for. He's
Yep.
trying to pursue truth. He's looking for fulfillment.
Yep.
You know, I'm trying to do the same thing, and
Yeah.
so to do that, we need to make this right. You
Yeah.
know.
That's awesome.
Was he? This was after you converted to Catholicism.
Oh, yeah, uh-huh.
Okay. Cool. That's awesome. And had he been Catholic, or was he coming into the church? What was?
I honestly don't recall.
Yeah, I'm just
You know,
intrigued. That's a cool little like glimpse.
But it's interesting that he came to that Bible study. I'll tell you that. Yeah. Wow.
the way the Lord convicts us.
Yeah.
God's a funny guy.
Yep. Anything high school, adolescence, like jumping out to you that you want to share before we move on?
No, I think we got into some good stuff there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Really? Already? Okay. Manny's giving me the break, signal. I guess we're already at a break. All right. No log to throw on the fire. We're going to take a break.
Hello, friends. I want to tell you a little bit about our First Fruits movement. What we do first in everything matters. It sets the trajectory of whatever action we take. In Leviticus, God tells Moses to share with the Israelites that they must bring forth the first fruits of their livestock, of their produce, and of their drink. The fulfillment of this is found in Jesus himself. He is the firstborn of the Father. He is the first man to conquer death. He is the first to ascend into heaven. Before Jesus' ministry, he would run to Mary for guidance and counsel. So why would I not do the same? What can you do to participate? Commit to praying the rosary daily, invite other men and women to join you, and share the movement with your friends on social media and other communication platforms. What can you do to support us here at Circa Ignem and First Fruits? First, pray for us and our mission daily, and second, buy our hats and future merch at circaignem.com. That's CIRCAIGNEM.com. Thank you.
And we're back. No fires. It's kind of sad on that front, but we'll get Bryan back here.
We got fire on the inside,
Yes,
guys.
and I feel we'll talk off mic, but I feel like Bryan, you'd be an awesome additional guest for like political commentary.
Oh.
Like
Excuse me.
from a what would be awesome is to also have it from a like Catholic perspective, right? So political Catholic perspective on.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
Yes, thank you.
We do a topic episode sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
We'll have to shape
we just
one
have
around
it
you.
organized around them as well as we have in the past, and that's kind of the looking ahead type thing.
Just War would have been a good one.
Yeah, we did our own little hodgepodge blue collar thing with it.
Blue collar theology.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yep. All right. So, adulthood. So once you graduated and moved into the beautiful realm of college, what did that look like?
So I did my undergrad at UC Davis and double majored in political science and communications, and I minored in comparative literature.
Jeez, getting after it. Getting after it.
I was getting after it, maybe a little too much in some respects, and honestly not enough in other respects. I remember my first semester. It's like, okay, I'm here. We're here to learn. And I'm just like, what? And when I got there, I was like, what the heck is this? Because it was just like, everybody's like, you're gone from your parents. Everybody has their freedom.
Yeah.
It's just total anarchy.
Madness. Yeah.
Parties, blah, blah, blah. I mean, not like I was always partying or anything like that. I mean, I would go to parties, certainly.
Sure.
But, like, I mean, let's just say there's a spectrum. I felt like I was somewhat reasonable in that. Not always entirely reasonable, but I think unfortunately what you learn in college, at least, and I think it's true for a lot of private schools as well as public, is you learn how to pass your classes while trying to maximize your social time.
Yep.
So if you get a C,
I don't disagree with that.
If you get a C or better, that's fantastic. It's just so you can have more time to party and hang out with your friends and stuff like that.
What's the saying? C's good degrees.
Yeah, and so so not to say that I was totally unstudious, but I mean that's I think the lesson that a lot of us learned.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of students, like, MTV was a big influence, the spring break sort of mindset, and so I think that's sort of the that's sort of the attitude that you have on a lot of college campuses. So that's sort of the ethos. Not entirely the best ethos.
Yeah.
I will say the standout, I guess what stood out for me was, because I teach political science, I honestly don't remember any of my I remember very little about my political science classes. But what was memorable, and I was blessed to have this experience, is that my junior year, I applied to the Washington, D.C. internship program that the UCs have. And so it's all the UCs have it. So through UC Davis, and then, you have to secure an internship. And then so I interned for Congressman George Radonovich in the D.C. office.
That's awesome.
So I was an intern sitting at the front desk. They'd come in with, 2 stacks of mail every day, go through, sort the mail, answer the phones. When constituents would come, give them tours around the Capitol building, help the legislative staff with, do their research, stuff like that.
That's cool.
And then you had to take a class. So I took and then you have to do a research paper. So I took a class on Congress. My professor was from UCLA. and our class was in the congressional hearing room.
Nice.
On Capitol, one of the congressional hearing rooms on Capitol Hill, and we ran a congressional simulation in the hearing rooms. And it was on whether or not to give most favored nation status to China while the Congress was going to vote on whether or not to give most favored nation status to China.
You're mimicking what was actually going to be happening.
Right, that's right. And then that was a lot of fun because, okay, all right, now you're jogging memories. Hold up, I got to sit up for this. So here's what was cool. And I guess I'm proud of myself for this. So I played Henry Wu, who was a human rights activist. Okay. Calling out abuses against the Falun Gong in China by the CCP. Mm-hmm. And there was this girl from UCLA, and she was like grilling all the witnesses, just roasting them. Okay. And I was like, but what I didn't know, I don't know why I knew to do this, but I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try and anticipate what their questions are. And I'm going to look at all the crazy stuff they said. Yeah. And I'm going to I had a file on each one of their congressmen, the people,
So you were doing heavy research.
I was doing research, and I'm like, well, it's interesting you say that because you actually on November 12th, 1999, you actually said this. So how do you explain that? So I turned it back. I flipped the script on them. Yeah. And people, they're like, what the heck is this? And I was like, what's up? What?
The lawyer in
I was
really
like,
came out.
I'm like, what's up? What you got? Where are you at?
Henry Wu, I know you better than you know yourself.
Right, exactly. So it was cool. Yeah. It was cool. And then that was the best, and so made some really good friends, during that experience and stuff. And then so the group of us from UC Davis, when we came back, now that was my peer group. Now we were hanging out all the time.
Nice.
They were a little bit more.
So serious. You're with the group from UC Davis. It's not a mix of.
When you're there, you're in the classes and you're doing all that. You're all mixed together. Okay. But because we're from the same school, we were kind of like, gotcha. It's a little bit more like familiarity or whatever. But so a lot of us became tight. Yeah. And so when we came back after so this was the spring quarter of my junior year, and then senior year, and we were all hanging out a lot.
Nice. So, I was you answered the question. I was like, is this a part of the summer program, or was it? But it was an actual quarter during the school year. That's cool. Yeah. So you were attending one class while working the internship.
There's one class, and then there's another. It was a research class, so I was working on a paper, and so I remember doing a paper on military readiness.
Interesting.
Yeah. So this is like
from a military leadership or from a political level?
Well, so it was looking at the number of operations we were involved in, and then what's the wear and tear like on military personnel and our military infrastructure. And so it was interesting, it's peacetime, after that's the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Cold War's over, but during the Clinton administration, we were involved in more hot spots than ever. Yeah. When we were in Serbia, that whole situation there, they were taking parts. Our Air Force, they were flying sorties, and then they'd come back, take parts off the plane, put them on the next planes that were the next group of planes that were going to fly their sorties, and then go and fly those. Yeah. So just craziness. Yeah. So.
For sure, not ready for any sort of actual affront.
No, yeah. And the United States has always maintained a two-war strategy or a two-front strategy. Yep. So anyway, that's wasn't a good look. So that was what my paper was about.
Nice. poking the bear, so to speak.
A little bit, just a little bit.
Poking the bear. Okay, so you get back from this awesome experience, senior year, senior quarter. You're tight with all these people. What's next? What are the memories? Where's the direction going from there?
So after that, after I graduated, like I was, wanted to go to law school, but I don't know. I just felt like I don't want to like just jump right into it or things like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I actually moved to Sacramento, and I worked in California politics for about 3 years.
Okay. Right out of UC Davis.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my first job, I was press aide for a statewide gubernatorial campaign.
Okay.
So I did that for about 9 months or so.
Okay.
And that was super cool.
Okay.
That was a super cool experience.
Nice. Who are you aiding for?
It was Bill Simon was the candidate running against Gray Davis. This was before the recall.
Yep.
And
don't remember Bill Simon, but I do.
That's
remember
okay.
Gray Davis.
Yeah, his dad was Secretary of Treasury for one of the previous Republican presidents. I don't remember which one right now.
Okay.
Maybe Reagan, but somebody's going to have to look that up. I don't know.
Yeah.
So a lot of I know we were kind of talking down about politics earlier, and there are really some shady people in politics, some really sad shady people, but there's some really good people in politics too. Just really great. And most of the people I worked with on that campaign were really cool.
Okay.
And it started from the campaign manager.
Nice.
They worked on the Reagan '84 campaign and worked for George Duke Majan.
Wow.
And all this, and just super down to earth. Then we get into the primary season, and you're working really long hours, so we're there, 6, 7, 8 o'clock or whatever. And the campaign manager, he lives in a nice big house. He drives a Mercedes, all this. And he's like, hey, he's like, do you guys want to get pizza and then go to the game? It was a Sacramento Kings game.
Nice.
So I'm kind of a Kings fan. Not right now, but...
You exist.
I exist. Yeah,
I am a Kings fan as well.
Yeah, we're out there, man. What's up? So look at Tyrese Halliburton. Is going to the finals now. They kept De'Aaron Fox, and that was a mistake. Anyways, he's not with them anymore.
The basketball downloader.
But whatever. Okay.
It was Nixon and Ford, by the way.
What's that?
Nixon and Ford were the presidency.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So that was obviously before I was born. But
I was going to say, dude, Nixon and Ford, that's reaching.
Yeah. So, what was the question again? What were you?
So you were working long hours.
Oh yeah, working long hours, and then Sacramento. So he's like, "Do you want to go?" So he had season tickets to the Kings games, and this is when they had, what was it, Chris Webb and
Bibby,
Bibby, and Paige Stojakovic, and Vlade Divac, So
the good old days.
So
I went to a couple games when they were in that age.
Yeah. So he's like, "Hey, do you want to come?" And then he's like, and I just like, so it's like this 3, and I'm just like, you're low man on the totem pole, and he's asking if you want to go to a game and like all that. So just really down to, let's do it. So it's like just really down to earth, and so it was a lot of fun. It was a really great experience, and I learned a lot working on that campaign, and that stuff I still use some of those skills that I learned working as a press aide. I still use them today. So that was a formative experience. And then so I went on to work for it's an independent contractor for a governmental relations firm, and then for a different one. It was a couple of governmental relations firms. I was deputy press secretary for a statewide ballot initiative.
Yes.
It was for it was a tribal gaming initiative.
Okay.
And I don't know if I would have do something like that again. But I mean, I needed the money. I mean, you need to eat.
Yeah.
So and
it was a job.
It was a job, and it was from the same guys that were working who did the Bill Simon campaign, and they wanted to say, "Hey, we got this thing. Can you?" And that was interesting because there were Republicans and Democrats working on. There were Republicans and Democrats that were for this initiative. And there were Republicans and Democrats who were against it.
Yeah.
So it was like. There was a couple of us who were Republicans, and then there was a couple of, hired a couple of Democrats, and everybody's kind of
rubbing shoulders.
Yeah, so it was interesting. I'm like, wow, we can kind of work together when we're not like at each other's throats and stuff like that. Like what the heck?
The bipartisan.
It was totally bipartisan. Yeah. So that was kind of a unique experience, and so that's sort of the interim period was working in California politics. Yeah,
total of 3 years.
About 3 years.
Yeah, different roles.
Okay. Yeah, and the thing about working in politics is the kind of work I was doing. Especially if you're working on campaigns, that is seasonal work. That's not year-round employment. And it's fine if you're just sort of banging around in your, early 20s or mid 20s or whatever. But it's not stable. What's stable is, you want to be a full-time employee in a lobby firm. Mm-hmm. If you're a lobbyist, you're working for governmental relations firms, that's where the full-time, and it pays well, but you're working crazy hours too.
Yeah.
But that's where the stability and the money is in politics.
Yeah, it's not seasonal.
It's not the election. The people make money. Yeah. So you want to have clients. You don't want to be working on the campaigns all the time.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Where let's delve real quick into in terms of your faith. Where were you at this point, post college, doing this work?
I think I was going to church. There was a small Armenian Apostolic church in Sacramento, St. James.
Okay.
I don't think I was going every Sunday.
Okay.
I think I was going like once a month.
Yeah.
So that's where I was. I don't think, I think it wasn't until I think my faith journey, I think the second half of that 3 years is where I started exploring my faith a little bit more and trying to get more serious.
What caused that shift?
I think what happened at that time was, I was in a relationship for a couple of years, and then we broke up, and, still friendly. It wasn't like, obviously I was really sad and everything, but I was just thinking, well, because I invested my happiness in this relationship, what have you, and I was like, well, that was not fulfilling, So I said there has to be more, and it wasn't like profound or a crisis or dramatic or anything like that. It's just something I thought to myself, and I just I think started reading my Bible. So I asked the priest, I want to learn more about my faith, and stuff like that. So he gave me a Bible to read.
Nice.
So that's how it started.
Yeah, and that's.
I'm sorry.
No, go for it, man.
Up to that point, you said you were just doing once a month and that kind of thing. What do you think it was that kept that bare minimum. Bare minimum is a weird word, but
that's okay. Yeah,
kept that minimum, that you would still pursue that?
That's an interesting question. So growing up, we would always go to church every Sunday. I remember my mom teaching Sunday school.
Yeah.
We were going pretty much every Sunday through high school.
Yeah.
And then college starts, and then you don't have that regularity, because you're in this whole new environment or what have you, and all those distractions.
You're not waking up with your parents also in the same house going, hey, this is what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There was an Armenian student organization on campus as well, so that was cool. But I don't know, I guess just the feeling like, okay, I got to go to church or at least try to make an effort or something.
Yeah.
And, I think that was it. The liturgy is very beautiful, and I think that was sort of what was keeping me
grounded.
Yeah.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Okay. So once you 3 years ish, right? You're doing the political stuff. What kind of bent you towards, okay, now I'm going to start like looking at law, trying to see if that's where I should be going?
I was always interested in politics. I was always interested in, I was in, debate in high school and stuff like that. And I was always had an interest in like intersection between law. I don't know if you'd say law and politics, but always just that kind of thing. And, I thought it'd be something I would be interested in, something I could be good at. And so 2005, I moved back to this area and went to San Joaquin College of Law.
Okay.
I wasn't the best student, but I was a pretty good student. Law student. Law school is crazy. That's all you're doing with your life is like going to class and studying and typing up outlines and memorizing outlines and all this other stuff. And there was a law fraternity. I was president of the law fraternity there.
Tied to San Joaquin?
Yeah, tied to San Joaquin. And then I had clerked for a small claims court, and then clerked for an immigration law attorney. So had I gone on to practice law and all that, I would have probably gone into immigration law.
Okay.
But, took the bar a few times, but it was not panning out, and I had to realize, okay, I'm going to have to move in a different direction. Yeah. And about
what law were you specifically studying before that you knew the immigration?
So you study a lot. So you're studying. So it's called torts, but it's personal injury.
Okay.
Like any injury to your person, injury to your reputation.
Gotcha. Okay.
All that kind of stuff. Contracts, real property, civil procedure, criminal law, constitutional law. There's about 12 or 13 different subjects that you learn and that you're tested on.
Gotcha.
So after I decided to move in a different direction, that's when things started happening for me. So I, and part of the reason I thought about teaching was that like a lot of my teachers in law school were part-time. Okay. They had full-time jobs as judges or lawyers.
And they were doing this.
They were doing that on the side. And I'm like, well, let me see if I can do that.
Yeah.
And So put out my resume and all this, and then so I was teaching at Madeira for a couple of years part-time, but those were kind of lean. After law school and adjunct, those were sort of lean years. Mm-hmm. You do not get wealthy by being a part-time instructor in a community college system.
Yep.
So
it's great as a side gig.
It's and the adjuncts are sometimes referred to. I haven't heard this term too much, but I used to hear them referred as like sort of freeway flyers, like because you're trying to go like COS or Fresno City, Madeira, West Hills, all that stuff. You're trying to cobble together enough classes so you can make a living.
Gotcha.
And so, and you're contractually you're capped out at it's 10.05 units. You're capped out, so you can teach 3 classes. In the social sciences. So, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go for a full-time position. So, I'm going to try and teach as many classes as I can. Make sure I'm networking. Make sure that I'm that there's people investing in me, so that they can advocate for me, so they can write letters of recommendation and things of that nature. So I did that, and then I applied for a full-time. There was a full-time position that opened up in the district, and so I applied for that, and that was probably the hardest interview. It's a big process, because there's the application process. They have to weed out the applicants to the ones that they're gonna interview, and they hold like 7 or 8 interviews or whatever, and then there was a writing component to it. There's a teaching demonstration.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, and then
put through the ringer. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and then then there's top 3 interviews. So I made that. That's with the president and the VP.
Okay.
So interview there, and that went well. And I remember they ask about your teaching philosophy, because they don't do it now, but there's like we talk about it like an artist statement. Well, there's like your teaching statement, like your
guiding principles.
Yeah. And so I quoted St. Thomas Aquinas.
Nice.
I was like, what? I'm just going to go for it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so I remember what he said. It's in the Summa Contra Gentiles, I think. Yeah. And he says that teaching is a process of discovery. So you're not really teaching anything, but you're not teaching anything new to anybody. You're sort of drawing the information sort of out of them, just like the doctor brings the body to health, or something like that. Then it's been a minute since I've looked at that quote, but it's like that sort of attitude only towards Aquinas education. So then the college president, she's like, I like that, and I was like, okay.
You're like, I'm striking a chord.
Yeah, I'm like, all right, because I don't know how many people have heard them, but that's and then so I got the job, and this
was with Madeira or Reedley?
Reedley. And then
and those are all within the CCCB.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And then the tenure process, it's 4 years. So you're doing tenure review every year. You're a contract employee. And then after the 4th year, you're granted tenure. So that was a laborious process, but I was granted tenure in 2000. So I got hired 2014, tenure 2018, and then I was elected to be department chair for Fine Arts and Social Sciences.
Nice.
Since then, we've restructured. I'm in my second term as department chair, but now it's just social sciences.
Social sciences.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So, that's been. It's been a long journey. Yeah, that tenure process can be arduous process. Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier on in the conversation the start of your. I'm going to jump into the conversion a little more into depth. The start of that was around 2008.
I was received into the church in 2008.
Oh, in 2008.
That's right. Okay. Yeah.
And so that really started 2003 for you. Because you said it was about 5 years.
Yeah, maybe 2003, 2004.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's roughly 4 or 5 year process. Yeah, that's fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's parallel to the timeline you just gave us professionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were kind of like working. That was happening in tandem with okay, law school. You're like, this isn't really panning out. Then you start looking at awesome.
And it's interesting. So like the 3 book, you asked for the 3 books or whatever that are influential. All of those. So the C.S. Lewis thing, that was helpful in just a basic understanding, sort of groundedness. And then the St. Thomas Aquinas thing. So in law school, I took a jurisprudence class of philosophy of the law.
Okay.
And the instructor was a very Orthodox Catholic.
Okay.
That was my favorite class.
That's so cool.
That was my favorite class in law school, was jurisprudence and philosophy of the law.
Okay.
Sophocles through Aquinas.
That's so cool. Yeah.
So his name was Professor Cronin.
Okay.
He's retired now. I think he moved down to Southern California to be with his daughter. But he sort of became like a mentor to me.
Nice.
And
did he know? Were you sharing with him like I'm exploring this, or was that just kind of left out of it?
I don't know. I don't. Maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
He
probably was picking up the
so I remember
nonverbal vibes going on.
I was asking him some questions, and I remember one time then he just sent me like a list of books that I need to read.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Like a lot of them were all Catholic books and everything, And he was so smart, and his that class was done in the Socratic method.
Okay.
Like a real Socratic method, not like, law school say, oh, we teach the Socratic method. They don't do the Socratic method.
Yeah.
This class was in the Socratic method, where the teacher puts themselves in the position of a student and then asks the person questions, and that method demands that you follow your assertions to their logical conclusion. And if your conclusion is absurd or evil, then you must have made an error somewhere, and then you have to go start all over again.
Yeah.
So then I remember there was in the class, there was a friend of mine, but he was he was like the smartest guy in the class. He was an atheist, and then they would, and then I remember one time, I don't remember exactly what the subject matter was, but I remember he cornered him one time, sort of in the questioning, the instructor cornered the student. I was like, he's like, you didn't really answer the question. And I was thinking to myself, no, you didn't.
Nice.
So I was like, that's pretty cool. And so I think in terms of like there's a sort of an intellectual side of it, and it is a danger. You can intellectualize the faith.
Totally.
I'm guilty of that.
Yeah.
But I think there is sort of that, for me, like that is satisfying.
Totally.
And I think that class it was like, oh man, this is beautiful. This is just, I was like, oh, I'm just like swimming in the river now, boys. I was like, this is fantastic. That's what I'm talking about right now. That's the straight fire right there. So like, this was amazing. So
what I love about what you're sharing too is like, again, back to the both and, right? So our reason is such a powerful gift, right? Like the ability to reason our way, intellectualize things, and then we need to moderate that with that we're talking about a person, and we're talking about a triune of persons.
Right, that's right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so as much as the human brain is very powerful, that triune person has created the universe.
Yeah.
So we can only go so far before it reaches this level of like, I just need to trust.
Yeah.
I just need to trust.
Yeah.
I need to make assumptions on certain things and just trust that like it is what it is.
Yeah.
You know.
And so the thing that was beautiful, so when we got to St. Thomas Aquinas, that's some of the most difficult stuff that I've read.
Yeah.
And I think it's some of the most difficult stuff anybody can read.
Yep.
There's other philosophers and people out there that are difficult to read too, but for me, this is up there. But it was just so beautiful. The way St. Thomas puts things is just so beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
I was like, wow. It's like, and he's describing things that are like so like, you know, things that we take for granted, and he's making all these observations. He's just pointing out and making these connections, you know, and everything builds on something else, you know, to get this more complete picture. I was like, man, that's amazing.
And what's cool?
That's fantastic.
Yeah, what's cool about what you're seeing with his writings too is that you're seeing it expressed in a classroom in live action, right?
Oh yeah.
So like that the okay, we're gonna run with this. We're gonna start out with a question, and we're gonna go to its logical end. Mm-hmm. And if by the end people are like, I don't agree with that, then we need to kind of work back to wait, how did we get here? You know, and he does such it's so deft the way that he poses the questions, and then he continues to like flesh, and you can see what we see written is what he was chewing on and thinking about and writing about and writing about and writing about, and then finally it made it to the final edition that we see,
right?
You know, where it's like he's done all that work to then understand what are all the rebuttals to what I'm proposing, right? Like what are all the ways that someone could throw darts at what I'm saying and go, no, that's problematic. That's problematic.
And you know, speaking of, you know, trusting in God, you know, I think St. Thomas is a great example of that, because, you know, he would, and I think I learned this earlier, but I was just reminded of it recently. When he had a problem, when there's an intellectual, like he's trying to figure out some aspect of something, where did he go? He'd go
adoration.
To adoration.
Yeah.
He'd go to a crucifix to help, and he'd pray to God to help him resolve the difficulty.
Talk about humility.
Yeah. So, you know, and we should be doing that, and I'm guilty of not doing this.
Totally.
You know, that's what we should be doing when we have problems.
Yeah.
You know, is he would put the problem in the hands of God, and God would say, okay.
Yeah.
You know, and St. Thomas had the humility, he had the docility, because it was all for God anyway, and to bring people closer to God. So, yeah.
That's awesome, man.
And that's what drew you into...
I think just seeing the beauty of what of sort of how God created the universe, and these laws, these properties, these sort of immaterial aspects of reality that are nevertheless sort of playing an active role in our lives and in the lives of our, political community, because it's dealing with the treatise on the law is what we dealt with. I was like, man, that is really good. It's like, that's, it had the resonance of truth, So,
awesome.
yeah. So that was a critical aspect of the journey, sort of the intellectual side of it, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And then because the other part, so the conversion journey is happening at this time. So the other thing is like, well, what happens to my understanding of myself as Armenian? Is the liturgy, like what happens with all of this?
Yeah.
And so I was doing my research, and so the encyclical I sent you, it's like from 1755 or something like that.
Yeah.
Pope Benedict XIV, and I guess there's some in that encyclical. I was reviewing it before I was coming over here. So in that encyclical, there's some monk or missionary or something that's, putting forward these questions about I'm here, we're trying to spread the gospel, but there's these Armenian Catholics, there's these Syriac Catholics, and what do we do with these converts or whatever? And Pope Benedict was like, bro, he said, so he ends the encyclical with, you're not to you can't say that the Latin rite's the only way to be Catholic.
Yeah.
He says the goal is for them to be Catholic, not to be Latin.
Yeah.
And I was just
That's
like,
awesome. Yeah.
Game, set, match, son. What's up? Everybody stay in their lane.
Yeah.
What's up? I'm like, that's all right. Coming in hot. What?
That's awesome.
I'm like, this is. I'm like,
And
that's
especially the Pope saying that.
Yeah, I'm like, that's right. I'm like, yeah, you stay over there. What? Stay over there. Yeah.
Well, especially historically when you look at, and this is a super quick glance, right?
Yeah.
But when you look at the Orthodox rites that don't recognize, right, papal authority, a lot of them, most of them have to do with miscommunication.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Early on.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And it's just exacerbated over many, many centuries, right? But early on, it had to do with this particular bishop didn't get the Pope's letter that was going out for some ecumenical council or something like that.
Yeah.
And then they're miffed, and then it becomes, no, screw you guys, we're not in anymore, so we're just going to do our own thing.
Well, that's why the Oriental Orthodox left after, I think, Chalcedon, because, I know the Armenians were, worried about the Persians, and the Persians were Zoroastrian. It's we're trying to stave these folks off from, totally conquering us.
Yeah.
So there's this council, but we can't go to the council because we're in
Fighting
this
for our
conflict.
lives.
Yeah.
And
then
you guys expect us just to up and leave.
Yeah. And then we're you want to have this council, and so we're peace out.
Yeah.
I didn't say it like that.
No.
Saying right.
Yeah.
But if they did, I'd be very surprised.
Yeah.
But
they probably did make this.
Yeah. Well, it's probably they go like this.
Oh,
That's what it is.
Okay.
It's like that. Yeah. It's actually beautiful when the priest gives a blessing.
Okay.
So it's your ring finger and the thumb meet, and that's the hypostatic union.
Okay.
Jesus, human and divine nature, and then these three fingers with the Holy Trinity.
Nice.
So it's
awesome.
Yeah.
No detail.
Yeah.
No detail
Everything has its place.
Yeah.
So, and then I was looking at other papal encyclicals and church documents, Vatican II documents, Pope John Paul II encyclicals. Everything's like, no, we're protecting, preserving the Eastern rites. In Eastern Rite Catholics, they're kind of in the minority in a diaspora situation and amongst all the Latin Rite Catholics. So it's like, we need to help the Eastern Rite Catholics. And, so I was like, okay, so they're being the popes have been very emphatic about the ability of the Eastern churches that are in communion with Rome to maintain their traditions because they're apostolic traditions.
It's like it's not. It's not like the Foursquare Gospel Church down the road that can't trace it beyond 200 years ago.
Right.
We're talking about thousands of years of
exactly. So it's like you have the right to govern yourselves and follow your disciplines and unity in essentials and
and ultimately not to papal authority. That's always what it comes down to.
Papal authority is the big thing, and so but once I saw that's the attitude of the church through the papal teaching, I felt very comfortable.
Sure.
Because that is something that the Orthodox churches are looking at reunion is what is going to happen to us if we reunite with you guys? Are we going to be able to preserve our liturgical traditions? And number one, how are you treating the Eastern Catholic churches? And number two, what are you doing in your own right that is going to be giving us peace of mind? Because if you're not doing it in the big right, then you're going to do it to us, and we're not going to go like that. And so that's interesting when Pope Leo the 14th got elected. That's something he said was that we can learn from the Eastern churches with regard to regaining a sense of mystery in the liturgy. And so I was like, that's what I'm talking. And he's talking to because it's a Jubilee year, and the Eastern churches were celebrating in their liturgical rites at St. Peter's Basilica. He gave that address, and I was like, this is fantastic.
Well, and I love that you're seeing. And I've never had to go through what you've had to go through, which is like the tension of, well, I know that this is true, but I don't want to give up this, right?
Right.
That there's continuity from pope to pope whenever they're writing an encyclical that's addressing this specific issue. That they're always there. To your point, they don't mince words. It's no. We will the Eastern Rite, whatever it may be, will maintain its own integrity so long as X, Y, and Z are met,
and it didn't matter if it was Pope Paul VI or Pope John Paul II or Benedict or Francis or now Pope Leo. And the first encyclical that was specifically dedicated to the Eastern churches was by Pope Leo the 13th. Interestingly, Orientalem Dignitas, the dignity of the East.
Yes.
But so there's at least, and the other good thing is relations are probably the best they've been between the Eastern churches.
I've heard this.
And the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been a lot done in the last 100 years or so. It's really beautiful what's been happening, I think.
What's your perspective on what's been the driver behind that?
Well, just like in any relationship, it takes two to tango. And so there has to be a willingness to admit fault because, the Eastern churches weren't the only ones that did things wrong in this relationship.
Agreed.
And so what so each side has to be willing to make concrete gestures of love. That's something Pope John Paul II talks about in his encyclical Orientalum Lumen, Light of the East. And I think it was at the 60s where like the Pope and the ecumenical patriarch at the time, they mutually lifted the excommunications off each other.
Not familiar with that, but it wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, and I don't remember which pope it is right now, unfortunately. But I think it was either in the 60s or the 70s.
The 60s. It would have been either John the VI or John the 23rd, right?
Right. Yeah. So there's that. There's the sort of International Theological Commission, which is a dialogue between East and Western scholars.
Okay.
It's been, and then just a willingness, I think, certainly on the Latin side of things, to recognize the beauty and the contributions of the Eastern churches. It's like the church started in the East, right?
Yep.
And the monastic tradition started in the East. The our theology of the Trinity comes from the East.
Yep.
So there's a store of treasures there that I think that the church recognizes it needs to take a second look at and appreciate. And so it's just concrete gestures of love. And Pope John Paul II in that same encyclical talks about, there's other forms of collaboration that need to occur for reunion. And the interesting thing that I see, just sort of my observation, is that I think the Eastern clergy and the Latin clergy are closer to each other than the Eastern parishioners and the Latin parishioners.
Interesting.
Yeah, because they're the ones, the clergy, they're meeting and talking and having all these discussions and what have you.
But the parishioners
are not. We're doing.
It's not like I'm showing up at your Armenian Catholic, right?
Yeah, they're not.
Hanging out,
And so, I think more could be done in that area. There's an organization called the Society of St. John Chrysostom. And I think they're based in the UK, but they have a huge charter in the United States, and there's chapters throughout the United States that work on that and that do great work there in terms of having East and West dialogue. Just it's a mutual sort of exchange of information and culture and things like that.
To your point, kind of being the vehicle at the grassroots level versus top down. So I think it might take a while for sure,
but things are headed in the right direction, I think. But it's definitely going to take more. There's still a lot more that needs to be done, and these grievances get passed down from one generation to the next. So that's not that, just like within family, maybe there's you have grievances between cousins or this brother and their children, things get passed down, and so that's
and when it's gone on as long as it's gone on, you can't expect it to change overnight, or even within a couple decades. You have to really, with to your point, the concerted, consistent effort from both sides to continue to lean into that and understand each other, start loving each other, right? Then that onion starts to get peeled back versus well, I'm only going to do so much effort if you're willing to do the effort, and then it's like, okay, we're right
because
back
it's
at
not going to be like, Orthodox Catholic debates.
Yes.
Or these, having a conference and circulating papers and stuff like that. Maybe some of that's helpful, but that's not going to get it done.
No.
So the way the church started, right? If you read, well, first I'm going to be talking about this next week, so it's fresh on my mind. And the verses that I'm going to be quoting, they were sort of also instrumental in my conversion as well. So Jesus in his priestly prayer talks about that he prays that the apostles are one, even as he and the Father are one. Right? In Book of Acts, right, it says they were of one heart and one mind. Right? And so there was a genuine love, a genuine bond there. And so maybe it sounds corny, maybe it's sort of superficial if you're not, but the what's going to solve it is love demonstrated in sustained loving effort over time. And we're going to have to return to that. And there's an element among the apostles about like who's going to be the greatest, things like that. And you can't worry about, both sides have to be willing to serve each other, rather than worry about their dignity or
status
their prominence or what have you, or so so that has to be, so I think those are some of the considerations that are going to have to be given some contemplation before there's concrete unity. But
could you
think that there will be.
Yeah, could you imagine how powerful that would be in the
that would be nuts.
In our lifetime, even seeing like that type of reconciliation happening, where it's like maybe not whole hog, but like a large percent of a lot of these, like minorities. We call them minorities, but they're still very faithfully, like Orthodox, authentically living out.
I mean, they have valid sacraments. They have apostolic succession. They have
and then
the whole thing.
Reunification, like that reunification. I mean, that would be just like thinking about it, like gives me chills in terms of that would be a bigger incident than the Berlin Wall falling.
Yeah.
When you use like historical context, and that was not a small thing. You know? Like that would be awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Let's so you mentioned a little bit about you and Alicia meeting. Let's jump to that. What's the story there?
So
that'll get us to current.
Yeah, that'll get us to current. Yeah. So what happened was I was on Catholic Match for a long time.
What's a long time?
A long time, like years.
He's like, shut your damn mouth,
and I'm like, what am I, chopped liver over here? What's this? This is ridiculous. It's like Rodney Dangerfield. It's the story of my life. No respect. No respect. So I was looking at her profile, and she's a pretty outdoorsy, adventurous sort, and got like some chronic back problems I've been dealing with and all this, and I have a tendency to play it safe. So I'm secretly grateful that we're indoors, because it's a very comfortable couch that I'm on right now. So I'm like, am I gonna be able to keep up? Like, how's this gonna work? I don't know. And I was just like, you know what? Let me just give it a shot.
Yeah. Don't shoot it down before you even start.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then I think I found out after the fact, like she had only been on there a couple of days, like 2 or 3 days or whatever, and like she was hesitant about being online and all this.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, then we're, messaging, back and forth or what have you. That's going well, so I could see that it's going well. I'm like, all right, do you want a video chat? Okay, so we did that. We tried to video chat, and then so like Catholic Match, it has the software where like you could do video chat through the thing, app, so like you don't have to exchange numbers or whatever.
Yeah. Smart.
Well, we were having a hard time connecting. We were having technical problems.
Oh man.
So like we're both messaging Catholic Match. They're like, hello, what's up? Where are you guys at? We need to
We're trying
communicate.
to connect.
And so it got resolved. And then I remember it was like this first, second, or third video date or whatever. I got sick, and I'm like, I was looking forward. I can't. I'm sick, and I was just like wondering, like, I wonder if she's gonna think this is an excuse, because like I'm like legit sick. I really am sick, and so
like, you don't want to talk to me right now.
Yeah. So she was like, "Oh yeah, no, it's cool if you're sick. That's that's cool." And I was like, "Yes." I know we just had a lot of rapport, and we were talking 3 or 4 hours or whatever on all this stuff. We were video chatting for what, like a month. We had a video date on Christmas.
Nice.
So that's that evening. Like we were with our families all day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, she must really like me. And we're like, I'm like, she wants to talk with me on Christmas.
On Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, that's so cool.
A good indicator.
Yeah. And then like, then we started meeting in person.
Okay. Was Lodi your normal spot?
Lodi a couple of times, Stockton.
Okay.
And then I think was it end of February or March, like I'd go up to Sacramento, and then she'd come down here or whatever. And I knew, I think after a month or so, like I knew I was going to ask her to marry me.
Nice.
I mean, I knew
the benefits of being a little bit older and wiser.
Yeah.
I don't need to mess around with this anymore.
Yeah. So she just had like all the qualities I was looking for, and it sounded like I had all the qualities she was looking for.
Yeah.
And then, so we dated for like 6 months, and then.
But you knew this whole time.
I was like, you know what? I'm like, let me, I mean, I'm not gonna like just
play it cool, but I'm
like, I have a good feeling about it. I'm like, this is gonna go pretty well. And then she told me she knew like 2 or 3 months after we were dating too.
Awesome.
We had
so she was also playing the game. I don't want to scare him away with,
I think she was a little bit more guarded.
Yeah.
Those first month or two, but. She should be, yeah. But yeah, and because we were both, we were having, the serious conversations about like marriage and family and kids and those kind of things. Yeah. So then, the beginning of May. Was it 23? Yeah, May 23 of 23. I bought her engagement ring.
Nice.
Was it May? Yeah, it was May. And then it took like a month to get the ring. I mean, you guys, you'll understand how this works better than me.
It's freaking annoying.
Yeah.
No, it's been a while, so you're refreshing my memory.
Yeah, that's okay. It's all good. Yeah. Man, I was sweating bullets when I went into, because she was like, because she had given me like. These are some of the styles.
Parameters.
Yeah, and I was like, so let me go find a ring based on that.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, the jeweler's like, do you want a glass of water? It's like, no, I'm good. And then it's like, you know, I was sweating it was so nerve-wracking, you know. So found a ring, bought a ring, and then I hadn't met her dad yet, though.
Okay. And she had no clue.
I mean, we had talked about, like, but I don't know if she had entirely had.
Okay.
I don't think she had a full.
There wasn't a specific conversation of, I got the ring.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. Speaking of water.
I'm taking that glass now. I'll tell you that.
Brian's nervous just talking about it.
I'm like reliving it. I'm going back. I'm back at the jewelry store right now. Son of a gun.
PTSD in the jewelry store.
Oh my gosh, sweating bullets. So, anyhow, so I think at the end of May, I'd met her dad for the first time. Went up to, you know, they live out in Northern California, and north of Sacramento. And anyways, so got along okay. And then her family was going on a cruise to Alaska. And then she'd asked me early on, you know, a few months earlier, do you want to go on a cruise with me to Alaska? Because I had heard her mention in passing. I'm like, I hope she asked me to go on the cruise because I want to go on the cruise with her. What's up? I'm like, I'll holler at your boy. I'm like, I'm right here. Let's go on this cruise right now. I've never been to Alaska. What's up? You know, this is what I'm thinking to myself. Like, it'd be cool. Like, you know, it would be a really good sign experience. If she asked me to go with her. This would be fantastic. And it was interesting because she had an aunt that was going to go, and I was going to be able to go, and then she like bailed or whatever, and so then I was able to go.
Nice.
And I was like, "We're back in business." So
you hollered at your boy.
Yeah, that's what's up. Armenian in the house. So yeah. So I didn't bring the ring with me because it's too nerve-wracking to bring a ring with you to Alaska.
And then you're on a boat.
Yeah, you're on a boat. I'm like, I don't know what this. I don't know what the situation's going to be.
Weird for the rest of
Yeah, I don't know what the situation's going to be. I don't have to worry about it. You know what I'm saying? So, and plus, like, let me get to know the family a little bit better.
You're marrying that too. You're not just marrying her, you're marrying that too.
Yeah. So I was like, let me wait to the back half of this thing before I'm like, I got to find an opportunity to, like, so she's doing something, and then so I could go talk.
Nice.
So I was able to sort of, I don't know, I said, I like brought like a little watercolor sketchbook. I was like, I'm going to go paint. And she was like, okay, she took a nap or whatever. So that's not what really happened. Yeah. What really happened is I met her dad and stepmom and pulled them off to the side. And then so I asked, you know, her dad's permission and everything. And he was, you know, very happy. And you know, they were very happy. It was very emotional, you know. And it was very beautiful, though. And then so when we got back from the cruise, I told him my plan was, you know, so the original plan was to go to Bridal Falls, Yosemite, and propose in front of Bridal Falls there. Nice. That was the plan. But we got sick on the cruise. We both got sick on the cruise. So we waited, I don't know, I waited like 2 or 3 days after, because we were just
dog
sick as a dog. And then so I was like, okay, so I started feeling better. I'm like, okay. So then I was like, I'm like, I got this ring. My plan was to propose. We're not going up to Yosemite now. So I call my dad.
I need some ideas.
I'm like, where should I go? And he's like, go to the Japanese Friendship Garden.
Oh,
in Woodward Park, because I had taken there once before. I hadn't even been myself. What's up? I've been depriving myself of all this thing. So we had gone. We went there on a date earlier in the year. Anyways, so I was like, wake up, we gotta go. Let's go. It's just like, what is all this noise?
Yeah.
So we went to the Japanese Friendship Garden. That's where I proposed.
Nice.
So she said yes.
Cool.
Then I remember that whole afternoon we were texting everybody and all this. I was really excited. And then, so I'm Armenian Rite, she's Latin Rite. I got to get permission from my bishop. So I'm like, she's not familiar with the Armenian Rite, so she wasn't like comfortable like getting married in the Armenian Rite. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, we got to figure out where we're going to get married. We're going to get married in Sacramento. We're going to get married in down here in Fresno. Yeah. And so we looked at Sacramento and we're like, nah, because for marriage prep was interesting over there. And then so we're like, okay, this is cool. And then so it was Father Michael Cox at Divine Mercy who married us. So I had to get permission from my bishop, which he was happy to grant. And he also has to give faculties to the Latin Rite priest to marry as well.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah. So he did that also.
So what's awesome about what you're talking about is that's like grassroots ecumenism right there.
Yeah, that's right.
Like all of a sudden Father Michael Cox exposed to your bishop.
Yeah.
And it's and he's going, absolutely. What, you just tell me what I need to do.
Yeah.
Which probably means that I'm assuming Bishop Brennan's involved in some of that conversation too.
I don't know, but I know Bishop Brennan was down in Southern California and he knows Bishop Meridian.
Okay. Gotcha.
And then so that was all cool. Yeah. That wasn't a big deal. So then I think we were, November 18th, 2023.
That's so awesome.
Got married, and the rest is history.
Nice.
We rode off into the sunset.
And now you got the rest of your lives to figure each other out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Now we got,
I love the love stories on this show.
No, they're awesome. It's so funny. Like when you're talking about it's so classic. Like the first video chat that you guys are trying to have, or maybe not the first, but one of them.
Yeah,
you're having all the technical
what is
difficulties.
All this garbage? It was so annoying.
I know for certain that I think Jamie and I had one of our first phone calls by phone after we had started recording. Mm-hmm. It was just a disaster. Just a freaking, and I'm sitting there to what you're talking about, sweating bullets of is this gonna be it? Is she just gonna be no, move on, I'm done, I'm literally playing the chessboard all the way down to it's done, it's we're out.
So and she was mature, it took maturity and patience to navigate through some of that stuff. So it really worked out, and so we got married. There's Divine Mercy, they operate out of Clovis East, but they have jurisdiction over the Catholics in Shaver, and so there's a chapel up there that they rent from. I don't know, a group of Protestants. Yeah. So we got married in that chapel. Nice. So we went. So Father Mike was like, well, you can get married in Pray there. Yeah. You can get married at OLPH, or you can get married in this little chapel up in the mountains. And my wife loves the mountains. She grew up in the mountains, small mountain community. Yeah. And then they have a little stained glass window. It says faith, hope, and love, and she wears a little bracelet that says faith, hope, and love, and so it's just
Alicia was just yep.
It was beautiful. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else that we haven't talked about?
So I will just say real quick, and don't need to dwell on it, but so one, I think it was back in 2020. The Armenian Catholic Patriarch did a pastoral visit to California for 2 weeks. And so I had the privilege of being the Fresno liaison for that trip. So he came to visit the Armenian Catholic community in Fresno. It's a small community. Yeah. But so I was liaison between the Armenian Catholic Eparchy, which is diocese, and the Diocese of Fresno. So working with them to coordinate, the logistics, the places he's going to visit, the events, doing some media and stuff like that. So that was a great privilege to meet the Armenian Catholic Patriarch, work with, my bishop, work with the Bishop Brennan, the Diocese of Fresno. Yeah, that was really cool.
That's cool.
That was really cool.
That's awesome. How long was he here for?
I mean, he was just in Fresno for not even for maybe just a day. Really,
so there's just
a
bang,
full
bang,
day.
bang,
Yeah. So there's because there's all these little communities. Even though it's like San Jose or Southern California. Certainly Glendale, Los Angeles. San Diego, but I mean, he was up and down California for a period of 2 weeks, just hitting all these little pockets, and so that was super cool.
That's way cool.
Yeah.
So that was with him for a day in Fresno,
and it's like, I felt like, because I mean, it is hard to be sort of just as an Eastern Rite Catholic in an ocean of Latin Rite Catholics.
Totally.
With not a lot of access to your own liturgical rite.
Yeah.
And I just felt like this was like a payoff, like the payoff.
Yeah.
Yep. And so that was really cool. Yeah. So that was a huge blessing for me. I was really happy about that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Any comments?
I don't know how much you can talk about your current ventures.
Current ventures.
What? There's more. There's more ventures.
No, I think. I mean, really, it's just. I think I talked about it earlier. I'm just, I don't know if I mentioned this before we started broadcasting or not, but just working on my teaching, working on becoming a better instructor for my students, and working on my painting, and and obviously trying to be a better husband, and all those, just grow together my faith with my wife, grow, and so that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's the plan.
Nice. I think Manny wants a portrait.
He wants a portrait. Okay,
it's in the works already. He has my picture.
I have a mugshot. Yeah.
Nice.
So
there's a long queue though.
there's a long queue.
Yeah.
And I'm actually we've still been wanting to figure this out. I want to photograph him as well.
Oh, nice.
So
awesome.
we got to figure out what to do about this weather though.
Yeah.
How we got to beat the heat somehow.
Is this for like business for you and Alicia? What's the photo shoot for?
Just for me.
Yeah.
Just for me.
Well, so I recently got. I mean, I had a point-and-shoot digital camera, and I recently got a nicer camera to help me take reference photos of birds and stuff like that. And so I was going to call on the services of Manny here to maybe help me out, maybe give me some lessons or whatever to better use this new camera. And then he was saying, he wants to take some photos and things of that nature as well. So
nice.
I think it would be a mutually beneficial collaboration.
Yeah. Let's take photos of each other.
So,
I'm sensing some.
Yeah, Eli.
I gotta give you a hard time. And you're caught in the crossfire.
Yeah, that's all right.
It's one of the detriments of hanging around here.
That's okay.
It's too easy with Manny. It's too easy. But he also takes it in stride. So. All right. Any closing thoughts?
Well, I guess I would say, if I'm just, asking these various, sort of questions about the faith journey and all of that, it's that, God is, very intentional about reaching out to us and drawing him closer to ourselves. And it is really worth it to be open and receptive to that. And then also understanding that, growing in your relationship with God, it's a lifetime, right, process, but just to be open to it and to make the investment. And the good thing is, the blessing for me is, my wife is right there with me, and we're mutually encouraging each other and praying for each other and praying together. And I think I can already say, like, I love my wife more now than even when I proposed.
Yep.
And so I think that's just been very beautiful, and hopefully, I guess I think the goal is, the same thing's supposed to happen to us with our relationship with God as well. But we can't we like to keep fighting. We like to keep fighting
for whatever freaking reason.
Yeah, whatever stupid reason we have. But as Mother Angelica says, we're all cracked pots. But there's some country music song that Norm Macdonald always liked to quote. He's like, I'm just an old chunk of coal, but then the line goes, but I'm gonna be a diamond someday.
Nice.
So I think
awesome.
I'll end
Norm
on that.
Macdonald, man. What a stud.
Rest in peace.
Yeah.
It's a great way to close out.
That is. All right, let's close out in prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, we thank you for this conversation. It's been awesome getting to know Bryan, and just how amazing you always reveal a different facet of who you are to us when we take time to sit down and reflect on how you move in another's life. Thank you for Bryan's sincerity and his vulnerability throughout this conversation, and just love his attitude and his jokes. May whoever needs to hear his story, may their lives be touched and changed. That we trust that this apostolate is drawing others to you by virtue of us being willing to stop and really reflect on you and on our own story, and not diminish the reality of who you are and how great you are. And as Bryan very well put it, that there aren't coincidences when we trust you, and that you constantly direct us, and it's not in a authoritative way. It's gently, it's subtly, it's quietly. You're calling to us, and our response should be to be in quiet, to be in silence, to be able to hear you and respond to that. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Saint Joseph, terror of demons, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.